T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of Kush in the Tree Wednesday on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. As has been a routine over the last couple of months, I'm joined once again by Chris Rice to do another in-depth conversation about emerald tree boas. For anyone who would listen to episode 1 or 2, it was hard to put a theme on those shows, but we're definitely going to at least try to talk about his experience raising baby emerald tree boas, talk about some of the different lineages and phenotypes that are out there, and inevitably lots and lots of other things in what could be another marathon episode. But before we get into that, as always, USARK. So for those of you who are unaware, USARK is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to live this lifestyle that we all enjoy so much. Check out usark.org for all of the information you need to know about the organization and any new legislation that is hitting on either local or national levels. If you are not already a member, please look into becoming a USARK member. As a community, we have strength in numbers, and when there is new legislation that is laid out in front of any sort of legislative board, the number of people that they can see as being affected by this potential bill, definitely has a large impact on whether or not that will pass. If they see that it's going to affect the community at large, small businesses, etc., oftentimes that is enough to sway those bills from passing. So usark.org for all you need to know about the organization, and I appreciate everybody who is a member. All righty, thank you everybody for being here tonight. We got quite the chat going already. I gotta give a shout out off the bat to Steve Doss. 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time. He was in the live chats, and sorry, Steve. Sorry, we couldn't get to you until much later in the evening. And sorry for the VIP lounge not being up to your standards, but hopefully for next time we'll be able to get that right. And shout out to everyone else who's here already. And I don't want to ramble. Before I do that, though, I got to say, as always, if you are here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. There's a new podcast that drops every single week here on the channel from some of the best hosts in the game, talking about a wide range of different topics within herpetoculture. So if you are looking for that reptile-related podcast content, you have found the right place. We are on the audio-only sites as well, like Spotify, Apple, everywhere else you get podcasts. So a follow, subscribe, 5-star review on those platforms would be wonderful. With all that said, let's bring Chris on. How's it going, man?
Sip right when you said that.
Perfect timing.
I thought I had a real quick opportunity there.
Yeah.
What's up, man? Good to see you again. Good to see you again for another Ramble Fest 2025.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, I've enjoyed these, so hopefully other people are enjoying them as well. And
yeah, me too.
I think we got some cool stuff to go into tonight.
I think if anybody has been enjoying them, it might be this guy right here. He's getting a little antsy.
Getting rambunctious.
Yeah. So yeah, man. So how have things been looking with all the snakes since the last time we've been on here?
Things are looking good. I've got I think I've got 4 active pairs breeding.
Nice.
So I've got 4 active pairs breeding. I've tried pairing a few other males that, for whatever reason, I think it's just a couple of them that are either too young or just, not compatible, whatever. It's still these 2 primary kind of, primetime males that are doing the majority of the work, that have been doing the majority of the work since I've had the group going.
Mm.
So each one of them is paired to two females, and
Okay.
those active locks regularly. Everything's looking good there. And then I got a few more females that I may or may not pair, and
Okay.
just kind of seeing how it goes. But everything's going pretty much as it usually does here as far as the timing of everything. I start seeing a little more activity usually after the end of January as it starts to
Okay.
kind of warm up. But
Yeah.
we're getting weird. We always get this at this time of year. We get like it'll warm way up till mid 80s or high 80s again, and then a few more days from now it's going to drop back down. And so
Yeah.
weather is a little odd for the next month or so, but they roll with it and do well. I've got all the females back on food now, or
Okay.
about to. A couple of them I've already given a meal. The others I'll be starting their food back up. So this is probably the longest I've gone as far as taking them off food.
Okay.
I think I started pretty much like right about November 1st.
All
And
right.
so now, starting mid February. So I'm pushing it a little longer every year, basically,
Okay.
with the fasting, and I'm just trying to kind of keep up with paying attention to what they're showing me.
Yeah. And
And
what have you seen every time you've kind of extended that fast?
I mean, they're definitely ready once you give them that meal. They're like, oh yeah, they're excited. It's been a
Yeah.
few months and they're pumped up about it. Um, I don't really see any big difference in terms of like no significant weight loss difference or anything. They look pretty much like they did November 1st when I took them off food.
Yeah. Sure.
So they don't a healthy animal's not going to lose really any visible weight. They may have dropped a little bit. I don't weigh them, so I don't know for sure. But there's no
Yeah.
visible difference there or anything. And
Okay. Cool.
but I'm starting to see more hunting now, and the males are like, "Yo, when's my turn?" And they're wanting some food, and so yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. This time of year is always cool because things are starting to get a little more active, and just trying to stay
Yeah.
on top of feedings and pairings, and
Yep. I know
monitoring
how that
everything.
goes. Yeah. Everything for me seems to be going decent amount later this year than it did last year
Mm.
for
Yeah,
whatever reason.
a little here as well.
We last winter, which my first winter out here in Texas, we had a like uncharacteristic amount of rain. It was pretty shocking, honestly, from what I kind of expected, and then this winter, like none whatsoever. So I don't know, that might have something to do with it. Not 100% sure, but that's the only thing I can really equate. Either that or also the animals kind of were all kicked into gear by moving in the fall of last year,
Mm.
and now that they had a full year to actually settle in, that they just are on a different time frame. So I don't know. I'm trying to be patient and just trust the process, but I definitely have had paranoid moments of like, what the hell is going on? Like, why
Yeah,
aren't you guys going yet? What's happening?
I
So
know. I've had that. I've had that before with the chondros more than the emeralds. The emeralds have been
mm,
pretty consistent. I think that's probably just because of them being, in the back room and where the natural weather kind of dictates what's going on with them.
sure.
So, but with the chondros, yeah, I've had a lot of inconsistency. I've not really been on top of my game with the chondros, to be quite honest. But yeah, when you're expecting everything and it's like nothing's really happening, it's like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
But they're on their own schedule. You know what I mean? They're in tune to what's going on in the room and what's going on outside, and we're just observers trying to capitalize on the what we're seeing, basically. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if anything, every year you just kind of keep learning more and more, add a few tools to the belt, and a few different like observations that you can make. Like for instance, like last year for me, and I believe we've talked about this on here, but I was noticing that my males were shedding after their females had ovulated,
Hmm.
and that was something that that was in my fourth or fifth year breeding scrub pythons was the first time I had noticed that, just because I was the first time I was doing it on a more full-time basis and actually was paying a lot more attention to my snakes. And that's something that I've been using this year too. It's been super useful for me. So little things like that make the world of a difference.
Yeah, I've got a little situation like that going on too. So I have a single pair of green trees that I'm doing at the moment, and I might do a second pair, but I've really only got one other female that's potentially ready at the moment, and she actually just went into shed. So,
Okay.
but I have a pair of chondros that have been breeding, a pair of Beox, and to my surprise, the female refused food when I tried to offer it to her
Hmm.
last week, which will be interesting because usually I fast them and then I start feeding them and they'll eat pretty heavily, and then they'll ovulate, or well, I'm
Okay.
sorry, and then they'll start refusing food, and then they'll ovulate. But this time around, this is the first time I've had it where she has not gone back on food yet,
Hmm.
but she's swelling up. She looks like everything's going, and then I just noticed the male's going into shed. So I'm curious to see if she ovulates when he sheds, like we've
Okay.
seen before with them, where it's timed up really close, like within a
Yeah.
24 to 48 hour period. So it'll be interesting to see if she goes, and we'll see how that goes. And I might try the other female,
Okay.
and yeah, just trying to pay attention to that, and pick up on all those little cues, and little events that I think are probably more important than any of us realize. As we
Sure.
continue to
Yeah.
learn more, we'll get a better grasp of that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a good place to start tonight would be some of the pictures that you've shared with me that we
Hmm.
were supposed to look at on the
Yeah,
first episode and then the second
the
episode.
last 7 hours worth of talking.
Yeah. Um, so this first folder here that you sent me was a
Okay.
lot of your adults. So we can just kind of go
Hmm.
through these and kind of give us a little description. So what are we looking at with some
So
of your?
that's Amarilla. She's a nice wild-caught Suriname. I got her, think probably mid 2021, I think. Maybe
Okay.
2022, and I'm pretty sure 2021. And just a gorgeous, gorgeous animal. She's an
Yeah.
interesting snake too. I don't know if you, I think I sent you one of the other pictures of her, but we'll start with looking at her now. She's got kind of this like smoky blue gray tone to the
Yeah.
front half of her pattern. And she's an interesting one for me because she does some pretty extreme light and dark phase color change between day and night, and then even just from day to day. It
Okay.
reminds me a lot of like what you'll see with boas, and I don't see that all that much with my other emeralds. She's one of
Interesting.
the few that does it. It's
Huh.
pretty extreme. Like you'll see more of the kind of dark coloration around the pattern. It seems to get accentuated
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
she's in
Okay.
dark phase.
Makes sense.
And then the front half of the pattern is darker in general, kind of a smokier gray. But when she's like fired up and really light looking, that front half of her pattern looks almost blue. I mean, it's really,
Yeah.
really, really beautiful. I've got a few videos where I was able to get her outside when she was in that light phase. And man, she's just a gorgeous animal. But she's also
Okay.
changed a little different since she had her litter. So she's kind of darker. I've noticed a little bit overall.
This is still her, right?
That's still her, yeah. That was, and this is a good picture. If you can zoom in at all on that, you can kind of see it already. But she has interesting head scalation. That she's one of the ones that has head scalation that's a
Oh.
little closer to what you see with like a basin.
Yeah, that's definitely basin head scalation.
It's very, very,
That's very interesting.
yeah, very similar. And she
Huh.
does what I noticed with her off the bat that was kind of interesting is that although I don't have personal hands-on experience with basins, from talking with Ed about it and talking with other people, they seem to be kind of a little slower moving, a little more mellow in general.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and I know one thing Ed had mentioned, and I don't know if this is really exclusive to basins per se, but I think there's a tendency for the basins to do this like kind of slow swirling tongue flick,
Okay.
where it's like a circular, like they just, I don't know if it's not
Interesting.
like they always do that, but he mentioned that one time, saying that
Okay.
you see that the basins doing that a lot, and I've kind of picked up on that. Like I don't really see my northerns doing that all that often, but she does,
Hmm.
and one or two of other ones do it, and I don't know if that's really means anything at all. It might mean nothing, but it was just kind of
Yeah.
an interesting behavioral observation of like that's yeah, just something pretty cool about her, and she was super super mellow, right, fresh out of the shipment. She was just extremely. I don't think she's ever struck at me
Huh.
once.
I wonder if she's some sort of like southern population animal or something like that.
Could
Something
be,
closer to
yeah.
the
She's
Mediterranean.
she's one of the ones that where like and I don't know if it means much or anything, because there is so much variety with them normally just within a single litter even. But I've seen a lot of the animals that look like her where you can kind of see it in that picture where she's got some of the yellow highlighting in the pattern. And her
Yeah.
overall look, I've seen on iNaturalist anyways, I've seen a fair amount of animals that look similar to her that are in the French Guiana area.
Okay.
Um, but again, you see some of that stuff come in from other areas as well. But
Sure.
so who knows with her? I don't know if she was from a Suriname shipment. I don't know if she was just caught amongst all the normal regions, or if she got brought in from somewhere else or whatever. But
Yeah.
she definitely stood out to me and has been a really cool
Yeah.
animal.
For
And so
sure.
she had her first litter with me last year, or shit, no, we're in 2025. She had her
Okay.
first litter in almost 2 years ago. It was in 2023.
Did any
So
of the babies from her litter have that same head scalation?
not to the same degree, although that's a good question. I should kind of review it. I didn't see it to that extent.
Yeah, because now that you
As
mention it, this is like it's very stark.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. I mean, it was so much, and her head shape's even a little different. She's got a kind of a shorter head shape overall
Mm.
than some of the others. But even that, that's the thing with this. It's tricky is that even within a single litter, you'll see differences in head shape. Um,
Yeah.
and I've had a few animals where I thought, judging by the head shape, that like, oh, that's probably a female or that's probably a male,
Yeah.
and have ended up being wrong.
Okay.
So it's not quite as consistent. I mean, there's some tendencies, but it's not a perfect
Sure.
system there as far as identifying them. But she definitely has one of the most unique heads of any of the ones that I own,
Yeah.
and that I've seen. Period. As far as a northern. So
Yeah.
she's definitely a favorite of mine, and I've got I can't remember if I've held 6 of her babies back. She had 13 babies in her litter in
Okay.
2023, and I think I've kept 6 of them, 5 or 6 at least, and I've let a few of them go. Brandon Wheeler got 2 of those, and a couple other people have gotten some more of them. Oh, there he is right there. Hey, what's up? What's up, Brandon? And yeah, she's just a gorgeous animal, and she's part of the project of like uh, she's kind of high white and high yellow.
Okay.
So she's
Yeah.
got those really nice yellow highlights throughout the
Yeah.
pattern, and so that does seem to be inherited. So I bred her with Tane, who's a male that also a Suriname male,
Okay.
he has the yellow highlights, just not as intense as hers.
Okay.
And but there's a few of the babies that look like they're going to be better looking than she is.
Yeah.
Um, which she's, in my opinion, a really really gorgeous animal. And
Yes. Apparently,
yeah, Brandon
Brandon's
said
doing the
yeah.
same.
Yeah,
Hell
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's definitely strong in that litter, and I think that's something that I suspect with line breeding will become even more intense. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
Because already seeing it, that heavy in the babies, it's like, man, these are going to be killer. Once you
Yeah.
get into the F2, F3 region,
Absolutely.
25
Uh,
years from now.
I don't want to go too far without hitting Lisa's question, but she commented on the color shift and asked if all emeralds do that.
Well, I don't. That's the thing that's interesting. I don't really notice it at all with most of them. So I don't know if they
Okay.
all do it, and it's just pretty subtle to where you don't really pick up on it.
Sure.
Um, she was the first one that I remember like kind of picking up, and I'm like, man, that just reminds me of like a boat, like an imperator. You know what I mean? Where it's like it's almost two different looking snakes depending on the time of day
Yeah.
or day of the week. So she's probably the most extreme example that I've seen with it. I have 1 or 2 others that do it.
Okay.
But I've
Steve,
noticed,
a lot of his do that.
yeah, exactly, and it's definitely more noticeable in the lighter green animals. So it
Okay.
could be something where the kind of richer, darker green adults, that you just maybe just don't notice it as much.
Okay. So he
Um,
thinks it has to do with when they get cooler.
yeah, very well could be. And then and they go through some changes too, hormonal changes as well. Both when they're gravid and
Yeah.
then how they look afterwards. Like the one snake, um, I probably put a picture in there of her, Artemis. She's significantly darker green, like a really really rich green after having 2 litters here.
Okay.
When I look back at her first few pictures compared to now, it's definitely like a noticeable difference. But I don't really pick up like with her. I don't pick up on any. Yeah, that's her.
So this is
I don't.
that.
Yeah, that's her. That's the first emerald I got actually. And
Oh, really?
yeah, April 2019. Um, and you see that she's got that nice dark, rich green color, and she's actually
Yeah.
she's darker now because I think that's probably like at least a year or two old video. And
Okay.
I think she's gonna have that real nice dark, rich green, and it's definitely a noticeable shift after having her first and second litters. So kind of
Yeah.
like it reminds me a bit of like what chondros will do. You know what I mean? Where you'll get more of a I guess with chondros they tend to get more pale, but some of them get a little darker and kind of bluish tones. But even you could see right there that was
Yeah.
earlier on when I had
That's
her.
her.
You could see that difference. Like her green is lighter overall.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
pretty
really
cool. Like that's one of the things with emeralds that I'm learning with the northerns, and in particular, um, that the color there's more variety in color with them naturally than I think a lot of people suspect there
oh,
is.
100%. Yeah.
And
Without
and then
question.
the changes in the white and the changes in their background color and everything. I think it's more significant than a lot of people are aware of.
Yeah.
I can't speak on basins from personal experience, but definitely at least with the northerns. And I see a comment from Steve there. He says that too bad they don't turn blue like chondros when gravid. That might be something where I've seen a few. I know Ed, I think, has a couple of basins that are pretty damn blue, where it
Oh,
looks
really?
it looks to be. I would guess it's that same phenomenon as you see like with an Aru female.
Yeah.
So it may just be a case of the numbers. We just haven't seen enough gravid female emeralds that went through that change in captivity
Yeah.
or something. Every now
Sure.
and again, you'll see some that do get that pretty bluish tint to them, um,
Yeah. Well,
but
kind of
not
like
yeah,
this
not it's
girl
not
right here.
common. Yeah, she have it as well, and she never, as far as I'm aware, she never had a litter, and
Yeah.
she was a very unique female. That's the one we talked about her a little bit, I think, on the first episode, Maya
Yes.
Mara. She was like the third or
That's
fourth
her.
one that I got, and she was an older animal, so she was darker. Just they're always getting a little darker generally as they age, and but she still had just a very unique coloration to her, and I could never
Yeah.
really quite my camera skills just using the phone. I never really felt like I could quite capture it correctly, accurately as far as her color. Something about her tone and the kind of sheen to her scales. At one point when I first got her, it's like this kind of reminds me of like some of the weird shit we used to see in ball python shipments, like hypo stuff and just
Hmm.
kind of odd coloration. But I think from speaking to other people and looking at other examples, I think it was she was just a super super nice one and an older animal, so that's probably what
Yeah.
accounted for that look to her. But man, I wish she would have. A, I wish she would have survived,
Yeah.
and B, I wish she would have bred because she was a phenomenal snake.
Yeah. That yellow on the face too is super
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, just gorgeous, gorgeous animal. And it's
Yeah.
funny. This video is a good example. That's an old video. I think that was like the day. I think it was the day after I got her. So that would have
Oh,
been.
okay.
I think that probably would have been 2019 or maybe early 2020. And you would look at that video and think she was tame, but man, she was anything but. She was a monster. She hated me.
Yeah. Hell
But
yeah.
that's what kind of it made her endearing. It was like she really I felt good for her even though it hurt
Yeah.
when she
That right.
got finally got a nail on me.
That's a great shot right there. That snake.
Yeah. She was awesome.
Yeah.
Super super cool snake. I hope to get another like her at some point, but she was pretty interesting. I think I mentioned it before. I've seen one other snake that I felt looked like almost identical. It looked like it'd be like a sibling of hers.
Mhm.
It was actually a random Instagram photo of a local in North Brazil
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
posted one. From what I could understand from the translation, it looked like a wild one that he had found
Okay.
in the area, and it looked a lot like her. And that lined up a bit with something that a couple people had mentioned to me, that she had the look of those northern Brazil caninus that used to come in every now and again back in the day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, man, that's gorgeous.
super super cool snake.
So then, it's another. Here's another female.
That's White Rose. So she's another. She's actually one of the few Guyana animals that I have.
Okay.
Most of mine are from Suriname, but she's a badass snake. She's real high white. A lot of
Yeah.
people tend to think she was like a Miss Willie line or something, but she's wild caught.
Yeah.
And just super super sweet and pretty mellow animal as well.
Cool.
Overall, I don't think she's ever struck, maybe once or
Yeah,
twice.
she looks like it.
But yeah, she's pretty mellow. And again, you'd see those videos and think they're getting handled regularly, but they really aren't. I
Mhm.
take them out, not even once a month, and just handle them for a few minutes here and there, and usually
Yeah.
just to get a good video or something.
Okay.
And most of them are pretty tractable. The ones
Nice.
that aren't are a challenge, and you got to watch your ass.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great picture of her right there. I love how
Yeah,
the
that was.
changes from head to tail like that.
Yeah, she's a super super beautiful animal, and that was actually like, I mean, that was probably 20 minutes after I unboxed her.
Okay.
So I put her in, put her into soak, because that's part of my routine whenever I would get any of the wild. Just immediately soak them for a while. And I know that's a little debatable. Some people kind of say you can't do that or you shouldn't do that, and I don't really agree with that. I see where people are coming from.
What's the argument?
Well, the argument seems to be that emeralds are idiots and they're all going to drown, and I don't really buy it. I think that some emeralds are probably idiots and drown.
Yeah, but that water's not even covering her back. Like,
well, that's another part of it too. I put them in such shallow water that they'd really have to go out of their way to drown in that.
They'd have.
But I've soaked them. I've soaked them plenty of times where it is up to the top of their back.
Sure.
And I think that temperature of the water is a big important factor there. If you have them too hot or too cold, they're going to flail around. And from that, on that note, I'm pretty confident that I accidentally killed a chondro. It was earlier on when I got back into keeping them, and I was doing the rain chamber bullshit.
Okay.
And I set this one up, and I set him up and had I just wasn't paying as close attention to the temperatures I should have, and I was just kind of winging it, feeling it by the feel instead of actually checking the temperature. And so I ran a pretty hot rain chamber, and it got pretty deep in the tub that he was in, and I think unfortunately it caused him to flail around and kind of panic. And drown. I don't know for sure, but that's what I suspect happened. And so I'm always careful now. I just use room temperature water. Something in this, anything 70, anything basically between 70 and 90 degrees is going to be fine for them.
Yeah, I agree.
And I find that they'll drink, they'll soak. It helps. I know Steve's putting in there helping with shedding if they need it, or if they have any mites, on intake. So I generally do that kind of stuff for a few hours and never have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, if you're around them too, like if they're, there's a difference between soaking a snake for a whole day and leaving, going to work.
Sure.
And like, I mean, shoot, I'll sometimes soak, like let's say with a scrub python, I'll put a scrub python in a soak for 3 days. I've never had an issue. I think also, you got to take it on a case by case business with the species you're working with. Like,
sure,
I would never soak a rattlesnake for that long if I needed to soak a rattlesnake. But the difference between soaking a snake all day and leaving, and like soaking a snake all day and having it like on your work table in your room, clear tub, your eyes are on that thing like every 15 minutes as you're walking by. Like, if something's going to happen, you're going to see it. So.
Sure. And I think too, and again, I would say that I agree to the extent of like that emeralds aren't, they're not always necessarily the most adept swimmers.
Sure. I mean, why
at
would
least
they
on the surface? Yeah, but but even with that, there's some footage. I know like Amy Benzie and I think a few other people have posted footage of them catching them on the river where they are swimming. So I think they're capable of it. It's just you got to be careful, and the temperature needs to be right.
Yeah.
And you need to know the animal as well. If the animal's really like an extremely nervous kind of spastic animal to begin with, then I would be very, cautious of soaking it and just keep that water really low and keep it within the right range. I see Jim posted there. He said he noticed when soaking, if the water feels barely warm, it might be 90+ degrees. Exactly. Yeah. See, the mistake that I think that I made with that chondro a few years ago was that I basically, it felt like, oh, it's a little warm to my finger, but it's fine. But I think it was probably more like 110, 120.
Yeah, it's actually for that reason we keep a temp gun right next to the sink.
Yeah, and that's the smart way to do it. Just to be on the safe side.
Yeah,
I now most of the time,
like, to us, warm water that you're in the 100, 115 range, and 75 degree water feels cold to the touch to a person, and like
sure
you don't think about that until you hit it with the temp gun and feel it, and you're like, oh shit, like I had no idea. I've definitely soaked snakes in water that's way too hot before.
Oh yeah, no, I think about that's the thing. I came to that realization of like, man, when I was a kid, I was fucking, when I would soak a snake, poor snakes were probably cooking, and I didn't even realize it. You know what I mean? Just not thinking about it right.
Yeah.
So now what I do. I mean, generally when I soak them now, I just use water that's already been sitting in a container at room temperature, where I don't even have to measure it. I just know
good call.
It's ready to go there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that was they Patrick says, yeah, just barely. Yeah, exactly, man. I mean,
Yeah.
if it feels anything other than lukewarm, it's probably too hot.
Yeah.
So just
Absolutely.
best to be on the safe side.
Yeah. I
If you're
mean,
not sure of what it is,
I'd
you
have
know,
to
check
imagine though
that
most
temperature.
people who are listening to us right now own a temp gun. Grab your temp
Yeah,
gun,
sure.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I, even though like I could probably get it close, why risk it? You know, if you just
Sure.
go click, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now I know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, can you get rid of the pic? Steve, you've been waiting here for 12 hours. I assume you want to look at the picture.
He's ruining his monitor apparently. So we gotta.
Yeah, all right.
No,
Well,
she's a
yeah.
badass snake, man. She's definitely, and her babies are looking killer.
Yeah.
Um,
Hell
there's
yeah.
one that's like a little clone of her, kind of, and but it's a
Okay.
male. It looks very very similar to her, and quite a few that are high white with that. And the for F1s, I'm real happy. It's just like, man, these things are gonna be killer by the time you get to the F2 range as far as high white goes.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well,
So
hopefully we'll get to a couple of those in a few further future folder. But here's the
mhm.
next, the last female in this folder.
Yeah, that was Mama Conda, which was the first Anaconda phase that I got, and that's her looking rough,
Yeah.
somewhat rough, not too bad actually, but she just kind of typical stuff
Yeah.
that you'll see. She
Like
had some
maybe
stuff
shed real
shed going
bad.
on. Yeah,
Yeah.
she hadn't shed yet, so
Yeah.
if they come, you know how it is if an import comes over while it's in a shed cycle or enters one on the way, that typically gets kind of fucked up and isn't the cleanest shed. But she was pretty easy, soaked her and she that's her like 2 or 3 days later,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I
she
mean, this
looks.
this is pretty significant just for anyone who's watching and can see it.
Hmm.
Same
Yeah,
snake,
same snake 2 days later.
2 days
That's just
apart.
from
That's
soaking. Yep, from soaking
crazy.
and yeah, soaking and being set up in a proper humidity,
Yeah.
tub. And yeah, I mean, she looked fantastic. She's one of the best condition probably that I had seen,
Okay.
as far as because I was surprised after she had that shed because I was like, man, she looks way better than I even anticipated. And that's the
Yeah.
snake that really, I mean, I liked the Anaconda phase before, but I wasn't like too crazy on them. I just thought, oh, they're pretty cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she
For sure.
changed the game there. Like once you have that, once to really see that snake in the natural sunlight, it's like,
Well,
holy shit, I
and that's
get
the
it,
thing.
man.
Like for anyone who
These are
hasn't,
every bit as cool as any of the high white stuff, in my opinion, anyways.
for anyone who hasn't experienced an anaconda phase emerald in person, I've been able to work with a couple. You
Hmm.
don't understand the true depth of their coloration until you look at that snake in person. Like
Yeah,
no picture can really show that to its full extent.
yeah, and I
Um,
wish I knew why that is, but I always when I look at the pictures, the video, I'm like, I've gotten some where it's like, okay, it's like that's a pretty good picture of her. I mean, it's not a
yeah,
great background, but it pretty accurately
yeah,
captures how
represent
she
her well.
looks.
Yeah,
But she still just looks so much more killer in the actual in real life in the sun.
yeah,
And I think Anaconda fades are one of those things that they're a little bit of an acquired taste for some people, but it
sure.
seems to me like almost everybody, once they've actually seen a nice looking one in person, changes their tune
Well,
if they didn't like them before. You know what I mean?
to me, it's almost kind of like to relate it to myself with the barnecks with like the reduced pattern animals versus like the heavily patterned animals.
Hmm.
I think the heavily patterned ones you can equate to the, like let's say like a Miss Willie line.
Yeah.
Um, but then I feel like as soon as one gets an appreciation for the animals, then the polar opposite, the anaconda phase or the reduced pattern,
Hmm.
becomes equally as appealing to them. And I mean, I think that's great for every aspect of the hobby, but also, it does take more nuance to appreciate this than a high white emerald.
Yeah.
But
It's
then it
not as
all,
immediately impressive to somebody who's, I mean, white is just a big, bright, badass color. It's of
yeah,
course going to be impressive. And
anything high contrast. I mean, like a snake that looks
yeah,
like that, that's
Patrick put a comment on there insanely iridescent. Yeah, it is.
yeah,
That's part of what's hard to get right. When you try to take a picture or the video, it just never quite gets it quite like they look in real life. But yeah, that's a big
yeah.
part of it. And the patternless are like that too. I kind of
Okay.
wonder with the patternless if there's some compatibility,
Yeah.
something going on there because there's a lot of similarities.
You'd think so. Yeah, they are. I've only been around a couple patternless animals in person. Not, I never
Mhm.
kept one, but I mean, they look
Yeah, you see it. You see
Very,
that.
very similar.
Yeah. And to the point to where they get yeah, they get I got distracted by somebody Jeff. The fact that Chris is a male named Larry is just hilarious to me. Yeah, that's
Larry's a
it's
great.
actually yeah, I mean I'm what did I think his original name was Legless Larry. And but we just shorted it into Larry. It was like kind of a play off of Larry David as well, 'cause I like Curb Your
Okay.
Enthusiasm and all that stuff. So yeah, it's funny. It's like, especially because he's a pretty beautiful animal, and you just show somebody a snake that's this,
Like, yeah, this
especially
is
if you're not
Larry.
familiar with it. Well, yeah, whenever I tell them, I'm like, yeah, this is Larry, and they'd look at you like, oh, Larry. He's like, couldn't you come up with something better? I'm like,
Oh
it
man,
works. It works.
let's see. That was this the okay? So where do you think we should go? Trying to see these
Yeah, I
reading.
can't remember. I have that folder that I sent you.
Yeah,
Posted this
let's go to this.
Yeah, we can just take a
So
look at whatever random you want.
yeah.
So that's Larry himself, the normal pattern
Hey.
male, and he's breeding with Anaconda at that point. I can't remember offhand if that was their second pairing, which was last year, because they've
Okay.
produced two litters together.
Okay.
The first one was in 2022, so I believe these were probably from last year.
All right.
And yeah, so this was I first paired them and produced a litter in 2022, and that was actually the second litter that I produced of emeralds.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was interesting because northern, normal northern to anaconda phase. There's still a lot of kind of not a lot, but there's still some confusion going on with how what the mode of inheritance is for those
Yeah.
for the anaconda phase. Just because there's some kind of quirks that don't really make a whole lot of sense. But I'm
Yeah.
also not super great with keeping up with the way the different traits can be inherited in snakes, because I know with polygenic stuff it seems like a little bit of a crapshoot, but obviously there's some order to it.
Sure.
And the anaconda phase appear like almost like incomplete dominance, but there's just some quirks with
Okay.
normal to anaconda phase pairings that you would expect to just get half and half, but it apparently in some cases can produce full litters of anacondas. And then pairing anaconda to anaconda, you would expect should be a full litter of anacondas, but apparently that's not always the case. So there's a little more to it that's going on, and I don't really fully understand it. And then you have these kind of in-betweeners that I'm still trying to figure out what that is, where every litter I've had so far, which I've had three anaconda phase pairings
Huh.
that have produced litters so far. So there's always at least one or two babies in those litters that to me they look almost like 50-50.
I'm trying to see if there's anything in the these folders here.
Yeah, I can't remember if I put one in there or not.
There might be maybe in the other one. I mean, yeah, you can't see what I'm going through right now. Here, let me pull up the other screen so that while we're on the topic.
If you can pull, I don't know if it's a pain in the ass for you to pull up the my Instagram, but I did post one of that half and half
Okay.
the other day. So if nothing else, if you could pull that up, it's on there.
Sure. So I'll tell me when to stop.
Well, so those are all full condas. Let me see. Well, actually, if you can go back, well, even let me see, go back. That animal's got a little bit of that look to it, but I don't think that's actually an anaconda phase. Maybe I didn't put any in those pictures that I sent, but
okay. Let me go.
I did post one on Instagram that's a 2-year-old that was the first one I had that looked half and half, and it's an interesting look because it kind of looks like literally. I mean, it's like front half anaconda phase, back half normal.
Oh, really?
But I'm beginning to think if it's more so the case maybe that because to me anaconda phase looks I think a lot of people view it as like a pattern mutation.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I really agree with that because I see so much variety in the actual shape of the pattern that I think it's more so it almost appears just like it's just a reduction in white. And some of them have more extreme reduction than others. And so some of these animals that appear almost half and half, I won't know until they're bred. If you go down that one right there that you're,
this one?
yeah.
Okay. That's.
It won't let you.
Here, let me try to see if I can.
Yeah, as you're logging in. So what I kind of think about some of those animals that maybe look like they're half and half or whatever you want to call it, it almost looks more so like they just have they're like a lower expression maybe. So
Okay.
they don't have as much white reduced, but they have a significant amount, and so the front half ends up looking kind of like an anaconda phase because the front half of the body tends to have the least amount of white to begin with.
Okay.
So, but that snake that you were about to look at, if you can pull it up once you get the login stuff sorted,
Yeah.
it is an interesting animal because it also has these white circles spaced in between the typical pattern, the typical bolts on the lower half of the body. So I don't know what's going on with it. It's pretty interesting though to me. Like it's a cool look, and we'll see in time how they turn out as far as once I get the opportunity to breed them back to each other, to other
Yeah.
animals, and lots to work with there.
Okay.
Steve says, "Let's see the albinos you're hiding." Yeah,
Yeah.
no albinos. I'm curious about that. I think Warren mentioned at one point that there was an albino northern that was born sometime
Really?
in the last few years.
Huh.
Apparently, I can't speak today. But I've never seen a picture of it. If so, yeah, I don't know. But maybe he was just pulling a fast one, joking. 'Cause I know I think it was an episode where he mentioned like. He's like, "Oh, I got an albino. I've been hiding out, and we fell for it." So maybe he was just joking about that. I don't know, but I've never seen a picture of one. I know there's like calicos and stuff that have been born,
Hmm.
and some interesting looking, things like that, and of course the pixel emeralds. But I've never seen a picture of an albino of either caninus or basins, or so could be out there, and I just haven't seen them.
Okay.
But
I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, that would.
yeah, I mean, it seems plausible. I wouldn't be surprised if one has been born before. I've just never seen it, so
Yeah.
I wonder if it would, how it would look if it would look kind of like the albino chondros do. Like I'm picturing like the one MJ's using on the thumbnail for a lot of the All in the Tree Tuesdays episodes right now. That really beautiful Maroke albino.
Yeah.
So maybe it would have a look like that. It's hard to say. Yeah, Steve said I've looked everywhere and can't find it. Yeah, I've never seen it either. So
yeah,
we'll see how that is. But that picture you're showing right there, that's just a nice. That's a normal pattern from that first anaconda phase to normal pairing. So,
okay.
And this is where things get a little interesting. So from what I understand of this, that one looks. It doesn't really show any anaconda phase influence. Nothing that's obvious, anyways. But apparently that animal may have the potential, if bred back to an anaconda phase, to produce a full litter of anaconda phase, which just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, I'm at the point where I kind of try to figure it out and like get my head around it all, but I feel like it's just going to take a little more time and breeding. But I think Glenn Bogue at Dutch Arboreals has probably either got it all figured out already, or if not, he'll have it figured out soon, because he's done a lot of really awesome work with anaconda phase in particular.
Okay.
He's I think he's at least second generation, if not third generation anaconda phase, and he's done all the combos you would expect to try, and probably then some. So phenomenal group of animals. Really, really, really awesome work he's doing with Northerns there.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it definitely inspired me a lot too. Like seeing his collection after I got my first Conda, and I was looking into him, and I was stumbling into his galleries on his website. I'm like drooling. I'm like, wow, these are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of like, I probably got too many anaconda phase, if that's a thing you can have. Maybe you can't have too many, but
yeah, kind of probably depends who you ask.
Yeah. But I mean, I got to make some tough decisions on how many of those to let go, because
yeah, true.
It's definitely too many at the moment. But
how many is too many?
I'm pretty sure I got 20.
Okay. Yeah, that's decent. I think.
Yeah.
Between
the adults and the babies that I produced, 20. I don't think it's more than maybe 21 or 22. I'd have to count them again, but
I got like 50 to 60 bar neck scrubs, so I might not be the right person to ask, but
yeah, 2 absurd hoarders is probably not the most reasonable discussion on how many to hold back.
Well, at least yours don't
the
get
answer's just all of them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, when you go to pick a a holdback, what are some of the criteria that you're, if you're picking between, let's say you have 6 Anaconda phase in front of you, what are some of the things that you're looking at that might make that decision for you one way or the other?
So at this stage, it's probably that trying to keep the ones that are a little different looking to what I've already held back.
Okay.
So because there's as much variety in the look of the Anaconda phase as there is with the normals in terms of
Yeah,
both color
for
and
sure.
pattern. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that with last year's litters. I was like, man, there's quite a few, that look different. I had it was kind of seemed like I'd have 2 or 3 that looked pretty similar to each other, and then 2 or 3. It's like there's this kind of somewhat distinct looks amongst them. Either they have more larger, more bold, kind of oval shaped pattern, which I guess is that to me would be more fitting to the name Anaconda phase, where it actually kind of looks like an
Yeah.
anaconda coloration and pattern. And then you have others that are more faint and thinner markings, and some faint enough to where I can understand where some people kind of identify them incorrectly as patternless,
Okay.
especially when they're young, because it's it'd be quite faint. But to me, to my eyes, it looks like it kind of looks like the pattern on a northern emerald, and I actually pretty much the same on the basins, because they have anaconda phase animals as well,
Yeah.
and patternless. It's like
Hmm.
if you look at the pattern, you have this kind of darker. You look at the bolts, the markings they have on the back. You'll have the darker color, and then you have white over top of that. And
Okay.
some of them have such thin dark markings, at least in my mind, they have such thin dark markings underneath the white that it looks like there's almost no border to the white. So it's a pretty
Hmm.
clean look. It's almost
Yeah.
borderless looking. And I am, to me, I would think that those, the anaconda phase with the really thin markings are that's like what they are. They have because the white's gone, they just have that really thin dark marking left underneath it. And then the animals that have really really big bold dark markings on them probably would have been high white if the white hadn't been removed from the anaconda phase
Yeah.
genetics. So at least that's what I'm thinking at the moment. And the side pattern's a little different, but again, even there, it's kind of hard to gauge because they all have speckles and circles and stuff on the sides of them when they're born.
Sure.
So I just haven't seen enough of them to really know 100% sure what's going on there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Let's see. So that's really interesting. That's a really cool kind of dark
That
mottled look.
that's a very interesting snake, and it's a good example of the sometimes unpredictable nature of the color change,
Yeah.
which is something we hit on that a little bit before, but I think it's pretty misunderstood with northerns in particular. There's a little bit of a mindset that normal, the northerns are kind of what you see is what you get when they're born.
Uh-huh.
I don't find that to be true. At least I could see where people make that kind of statement in comparison to the more dramatic color change that a basin goes through, because the
Sure.
basins will gain the stripe. It's like the stripe won't even necessarily be visible at birth,
Yeah.
and so and especially if it's a really extreme high white animal from Ed or something, then you're going to see a pretty dramatic change. But
Yeah.
the northerns go through a pretty significant change as well, depending on the phenotype. And in general, what I've observed is that the larger and kind of blockier the pattern, the more significant change they go through in terms of that the color of that pattern,
Okay.
compared to the more, I guess, common kind of standard phenotype where they're a little bit thinner markings that are spaced out from each other a little bit more.
Okay.
So, but that particular animal, if you look in there, you can probably barely see it without zooming in. It actually has white head spots like the new locale animals.
Oh yeah, look at
Um,
that. Yeah. Kind of right.
but they're pretty much gone at this point. So that animal went through an interesting change in that when I picked it out, I can't remember if I sent you a picture of it as a baby. I think I did. Um, it was it was a wild caught baby that was pretty much just starting color change, so it was still pinkish orange. And then and it had pretty bold marking, pretty that.
Is this
Um,
is it?
nope, that's one of my babies I produced. Maybe I
Okay.
didn't send it. Sorry if I
Yeah,
didn't.
maybe in a different
Um,
folder.
yeah, but that's had a pretty bold white pattern to I picked it out because I'm like, man, it's got some killer bold white up the neck, and
Yeah.
That's probably going to clean up and look even better as it gets older. And it had the white head spot, so I was like, oh, it's a nice looking animal. And
Yeah.
my expectations was that it would just get bolder and bolder white and cleaner, and it went the complete opposite route. So it
Hmm.
changed pretty significantly overnight. It got really dark, and I'm like, what the hell's this thing
Okay.
doing? And then it's just gone through this weird change where it's like it's gotten really dark, and then it kind of lightened up again, and then got pretty dark
Hmm.
again and lightened up a bit, and it's gone back and forth. And now it's about maybe it's 3 years old or coming up on 3 years old, and
Okay.
it's not quite as dark as that, or maybe it's about probably about as dark as that, but it hasn't gone like black, because I was thinking maybe it was going to do that kind of dark night look that I think isn't that what Forrest had, was a like a, I think it was called
Yeah,
the
that
Dark
thing
Knight. It was like a
was really
really
dark.
highly
Yeah.
melanistic one. Yeah, and
Yep.
there's been a few animals like that, and even in the basins as well. There's been a lot of different forms of melanism, it appears like, and but none of it seems to have been passed on yet.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's interesting about it. Neither in the northerns or the basins. So I have no idea what it's going to do at this point. I just thought it was very interesting that it went completely the opposite of what I was initially expecting,
Yeah.
and we'll see what it does, in time once it breeds.
Very
But a
cool.
cool snake, regardless. You know what I mean? It's got an
Yeah.
interesting color green to it as well. So it definitely
Yeah,
stands out from some of the other ones that I have.
for sure. So you have a question here about a young anaconda phase. You see them get darker or more pronounced black as they age, or will mine possibly have very dim, hardly noticeable pattern? So his anaconda phase is a year and a half.
Yeah, so far, I haven't raised that many of them from babies yet, so I can't, say for sure what they're going to do as adults. But so far, thankfully, which is what I was hoping for, the pattern seems to get a little darker. So the color of mine, I've raised one red neo and one green neo that are 2 years old now, and they were siblings, and they have pretty similar coloration overall, even though they looked quite different as babies. I think I
Mhm.
mentioned this before, that in my experience anyway so far, the green neonates start off darker, but they actually lighten up over the course of the first
Yeah, I
year.
remember you mentioning that.
And then, yeah, by the time they're around a year old, they're, give or take a few months, they're looking pretty comparable to the red ones, to where there's not really an obvious like slam dunk identifier
Okay.
to know whether it was a red neonate or a green. I've gotten to a point where I'm better at guessing than I was when I first started keeping them,
Okay.
but I can't say 100% for sure. So I would expect yours, if you've got a young anaconda phase. I would expect the green. I mean, a green will eventually get darker because they all do, but that's years down the road. But I suspect most of the time the black pattern or the dark pattern rather will get a little more defined and a little darker.
Cool.
That's what I'm seeing so far. But again, I haven't raised enough of them to know if that's always the case, because two is a pretty small sample size as far as that I've raised to 2 years old.
Fair enough.
Um, so with a little more time, I'll have a better idea of that. But everything I've seen of other, looking at pictures of other people's collections that have done, they're a little farther ahead with all that. That's that same animal that was
Yeah.
just, yeah, that was a different day, different stage of, like I said, it goes light and dark, but you can see how bold that pattern
Yeah.
is looking. I mean,
That
you would
really
see
is
that, you would expect that to just
so
get
significant.
whiter and whiter and more bold, but yeah, it went in a very different direction. So
Huh. Yeah,
interesting snake for sure.
definitely.
Um, but yeah, with the condas, for the most part, I haven't seen any evidence of looking at like Glenn Bogue's collection and his photos of them, getting like a faded out pattern or anything like that as they got older. It seemed to be
Okay.
a little more defined, if anything, or looking roughly like it did at birth.
Okay. Cool. So
So,
then this animal right here, you said this is one that you've produced?
yep, that was Uno. That was from Artemis. That was the first litter that I produced in December 2021.
Okay.
So that was, always loved that shot, because I managed to capture him with that spiral.
Yeah, that's really
It's
cool.
just I love when they do that and you can manage to capture it. It just looks super cool. And yeah, he just he was like the favorite, kind of just one of those babies where it was a relatively small litter and at first one, and so it was definitely imperfect, had a fair amount of slugs and everything, but he was a
Hmm.
little ass kicker right from the get go, both in terms of looks and instant feed and just was
Nice.
kind of one of those ones that's like, all right, there's no question on whether you're staying or not.
Yeah.
And yeah, that'll probably always be one of my favorite pictures. I don't take a lot of pictures. I'm kind of lazy. I end up doing video more than pictures.
Mm.
And I always felt like video was a little more interesting with the way snakes move. So I
Yeah,
kind
for
of right
sure.
from the get go was doing that a lot. But that's definitely one of my favorite pictures I've taken of them.
Yeah. So he's a little over 3 years old
Yeah, a
now.
little over 3 years old now, and yeah, just always going to be one of my favorite snakes.
So a 3-year-old male, is that one that you are attempting to use for breeding it, or are you still giving him some more time to
Yes,
mature?
no, and I did attempt to breed him. I just tried that for the
Okay.
first time.
Nice.
Yeah, which sucks about it is I attempted to breed him. He didn't have any interest, and then he, unbeknownst to me, he was intimidated by the female, and he ended up rubbing his nose on a
Oh,
part of the cage. So which sucks because I'm like, oh, fantastic. So he's got,
yeah.
he rubbed his nose raw at the front. Not too terrible. It'll heal up fine and everything, but it kind of sucked because he was such a flawless snake and
Yeah.
one of my favorites.
No,
I was
it's a
bummed
shame.
out about that, but yeah, he didn't go. I've had a male breed at under 3 years before. That was Tane.
Oh, wow.
And he's been a fantastic breeder. He was, or at least I think he was under 3 years old. I can't say for sure because he was an import, but I
Yeah.
suspect he was. But definitely no older than maybe 3.5, 4 years old at the oldest. And so
Okay.
that's another one of those things with, the age of breeding males. I've had some people say like, well, the younger the males are all going to fail and they're not going to do well and it's all slugs and all this. I don't know that that's 100% true. I know Ed didn't feel
Yeah.
that way. My experience hasn't been that way. Um, I think obviously you'd be having a lot of problems with 3-year-old females. It's probably not going to happen. But I think the males once they're in that 3-4 year old range are potentially good to go. But some of them, like I think we touched on this a little bit before. Some of them might not go till 5, 6, 7 years old.
Well, and I feel like it probably depends a lot on how you feed that male up until 3 years old,
Sure.
and how it started. Maybe not even necessarily completely having to do with how you took care of that animal, but if that thing ate from like this snake from day one, or if it took 6 months to get feeding, and
Hmm.
if this thing hasn't missed a meal in 3 years, that thing could very well be, obviously they're mature at that size, but then also have the physical size and then the confidence, but based on being so solid to actually be a breeder.
Yeah, yeah, and so that'll be interesting. So then in the next couple of seasons here, I'll have more of the holdbacks that are coming into age to start trying them out, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see the differences between which ones take, which ones don't, and then trying to look back and go, well, maybe this one was a better starter,
Yeah,
or exhibited some kind of behavior that kind of indicated whether it would be a better breeder or not. All that kind of stuff is fascinating to me, even though probably a lot of it we
yeah,
don't. When maybe sometimes we're reading too much into stuff or not enough, but it's always interesting trying to kind of crack the code and figure out, what's going on there. Um, yeah, nutrition to get on.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a
for
huge
sure, for
believer in
sure.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's
Yeah,
see.
so we can look at some other ones there.
Let's see what else we got. So we have. Well, yeah, let's take a look at some of these. So
Oh yeah,
that's
ovulation.
yeah. The cool thing about emeralds is that you're not gonna mistake that. you know.
Yeah. Well, you know what though? Like we kind of touched on a little bit. Until you've seen it yourself,
Sure.
they go through multiple swells
Yeah.
right in those last few days and weeks leading up to it. That can be pretty deceiving. And
Sure.
I know MJ had that this year, and or I guess was that last year? Well, yeah, it was the female that he's got that's gravid
Very
now.
recently. Yeah.
Yeah. But I called it with that female because I think everybody was pretty much telling him like, dude, she already ovulated, it's done. And I told him I was like, I don't think so. But
Yeah.
I kind of second guessed myself a little bit, even though I just didn't want to be an ass. But in my mind, I'm like, no, she hasn't gone. I'm totally confident she hasn't gone yet. But I don't want to you know, disagree too much with people and stuff on that. So I was like,
Sure.
well, let's see. Maybe she hasn't. But then she ended up, she blew up after that, got real huge. And yeah, once you see that difference, it's like the pictures, again, the perspective of the pictures and video never really quite captured just that massive swell quite right. And every female's a little different. Like both of her ovulations have not been as intense, so she didn't look quite like a freaking
for
whale
sure.
quite as much. But even that, like, in person, that looks more noticeable. It's real tight. It's like a certain kind of concave side. That one looked
That's
crazy.
crazy. Oh my
That
god.
looked absurd in person. That looks like you're concerned for the animal's well-being.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, that's gotta hurt.
It probably does. My gosh.
Yeah, and she looked miserable. I was like, man. But I'm glad. But see, if you look at that too, you can see that's one thing that for anybody that's kind of new to keeping emeralds or starting to breed them, if you can scroll back a little bit there on that video, if you look at the way the perch is configured there, and that's just a DIY, not a particularly fancy thing, but it's a good example of why those cross perches are really important for the females when they're gravid and when they ovulate, because if she didn't have those cross perches like that to use, she'd be just drooping that down off, it'd just be hanging off of the single perch, which you see some people do. And I'm sure that's at least uncomfortable for the female. I don't know if it has any negative impact on, the end result. But I would think
if anything,
if nothing else, it's got to be uncomfortable to be hanging like a horseshoe with this massive.
And they clearly use it when you give it to them.
Yeah. That's what
it'd be one thing if you gave them these crossbars and they just ovulated hanging, but if they're opting to use those, then that's definitely a sign that that they like it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and that's something over time I'd like to experiment a little bit more with. It'd be interesting to try thicker perches to see if they, utilize that more. I did get a comment on a YouTube video of mine one time where I think maybe of this snake or of another one that was ovulating, and it was somebody in Brazil. And as best as I could tell from the Google translation, it sounded like he was saying that in the wild, they're going on really thick tree trunks when they ovulate. That was just a random YouTube comment. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, because there's been so little of that behavior observed, or essentially none of that behavior observed in the wild that I'm aware of. It's always a guess as far as what are they really doing versus what are we seeing them doing in captivity because of what we're providing them with. And somebody's put there crossbars are important, but variance in perch thickness.
Yeah.
In Viridis and Chondros. Yeah, I agree with that in general. So I try to do that. Give some degree. I probably should, and in the future as I play around with things more and experiment, it would be interesting to add some kind of thicker options so they've got the whole range in diameter from the really skinny stuff to the really quite thick. They almost always seem to prefer that super skinny stuff, even at a large size.
For sure.
But
I mean, you have to imagine that an arboreal, like these guys, within a very, very short distance, are experiencing massive differences in these, the thicknesses of their branches that they're using, and they've got to be using them all just for different purposes. So.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So, but I think regardless of what you're doing in a captive situation, that at the very least for a gravid female or a female that's approaching ovulation, I think you want to give them some cross perching there. You want to give them those options so that they can support that body.
Yeah.
And they'll use it year round too. Even if they're not gravid. So I think it's always a good thing to have for them.
Definitely. So let's see. We got ovulation, juveniles. This is that same animal that we were looking at earlier, right?
Yep. And it's looking, you can see it's lightened up in that one. This is another one of those snakes that does go through a fairly extreme light and dark phase.
Okay.
Like Amarella does. So, but you can see it looks quite light there.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, and that's why I have no idea what it's going to do as an adult. We'll see what it does. I like it no matter what, but it's got that kind of interesting olive green, or this kind of weird tone to it, and really dirty, kind of melanistic looking front half in particular. So and then really striking eyes, which is cool looking. So we'll see what she does. Few more years before she would be, ready to breed. But definitely another interesting animal. And I love stuff like this. This is the thing with emeralds. Like I love the variety and I like, well, this animal you're about to show is pretty extreme high white and
Yeah.
something that's going to be obviously more impressive. I really wish that one would have survived. It sucks that that one didn't. Um, but I like the whole kind of gamut of the more extreme phenotypes, but also the dirtier, darker, kind of wild looking stuff with lots of speckles and
Yeah.
dots and everything all over the place. So
Yeah, those head spots are just
that was one of the most that was one of the best examples of that I've seen. And that animal unfortunately came in and it looked outwardly okay, but it didn't eat, which for me is always a bad sign if it's an import that won't take food from me. I know some of them do take a while, and everybody's experience level and also how you set them up when you're acclimating them is different. But for me personally, I like to see them feed on the first or second try. And if
yeah.
they don't, I'm always kind of like questioning whether there's something going on. In this case, something was going on. I don't know exactly what, but that animal didn't live. I think it lived 5 weeks maybe.
Oh shit.
And
Yeah.
I found it belly up. It didn't eat, and it was doing weird shit. Like I don't know if it had kidney problems going on, but it was urinating really crazy and just defecated some just nasty looking stuff. And I didn't have time to get it to the vet, and then it ended up. I found it belly up the day. I think it was the day right before Hurricane Ian hit us,
Oh wow.
and so couldn't get a necropsy done either. And so
Mm,
I don't know exactly what it was, but it just unfortunately belly up, which that sucked because I was like, man, that's a killer looking snake. That would have been a real beautiful animal. But yeah, unfortunately, one of those ones that's prime example of why you got to quarantine strict and keep it the hell away from your main collection.
yeah, seriously. So yeah, before we hit our break, I think we should take a
Mhm.
look at these videos here. I mean,
Oh yeah.
to be able to capture this moment is super special. That's
I was. I mean, it kind of. The thing about it is, it's like I kind of hated filming it because I just want to watch it. But
yeah.
I also realized I was like, this is such a cool moment to be able to share that with other people to film it. I was like, all right, I think it's worth it to kind of take the step out of the experience and try to capture it as best as I could, just because
Yeah.
I mean, it's really special to be able to see this and there isn't a whole lot of footage that we have of these animals giving live birth. I was definitely inspired by like Ed posted some videos years ago on his old YouTube channel, and that was a big inspiration seeing that. So it's like when I had the opportunity, I was like, all right, I want to be able to share this with people
Yeah.
as crisp as I could. And it sucks I got to do it through the window and everything. I wish I could be right up there with no window of the cage, no smudges
Yeah,
and everything, obstructing it, but I don't want to put her through any stress just to get a better picture. So
for
I
sure.
think most of those came out pretty well. But that was what does that say? That was Anaconda. Yeah, so that was the last litter of last year,
Yeah.
and that's it's so cool to watch them. And what's interesting, you can kind of see it there. Maybe a couple of the other clips that I sent will show it as well. Right. Oh, perfect example right there. It looks to me, out of all the litters I've seen when they give birth now, it looks like they're at least attempting to kind of aim the babies towards vines that they can grab right off the bat.
Okay.
Sometimes they do just drop them straight to the ground, but the majority of the times, like for that female, like she would move around, she'd cruise around the cage before passing a baby or two, but she kept coming back and basically going right to that spot and placing them right there.
Hmm.
Almost all of them.
Wow.
And
That makes
watched
sense. Wow.
multiple. Yeah, I've watched multiple females do that. Um, so it'll be interesting to see with time if it's pretty consistent or not. And I want to do a better job setting them up, with even more kind of supportive vines for them to get dropped into, because every now and again I see the babies get dropped where it's just like, man, they can just clunk the bottom of that tub or the bottom of the
Yeah,
enclosure. And
right.
it's like, I can't feel good, So
No.
I usually put several of the puppy pads down, or as Mike Stefani, I don't know if he's watching, he cracks me up. He calls them diapers. But every time he talks about the substrate with people keeping them on puppy pads, he refers to them as diapers. It makes me laugh. But I put a
So
few
yeah.
layers of those down there for support, and but still, I think I think overall, I'd rather see him get dropped into a more supportive vine system
Yeah,
where they
for
just
sure.
immediately can kind of grab hold.
Yeah.
That was a cool moment. That was a couple of
Yeah,
babies
look at
cruising
that.
around on her on the head.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was a really cool thing to experience. So
Yeah.
it's awesome, man. I was really lucky to watch all three of them give birth last year
Mhm.
and be able to capture it. I think I mentioned in the other video or the last time I was on here saying, I've got a pretty good idea of when they're going to actually drop them. I've picked up on the patterns of behavior that the females exhibit to where
Yeah.
I've got a pretty solid idea of when they're actually going to drop them.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty consistent so far. Um, they all, for whatever reason, for me anyway, so far they all seem to be waiting for the sun to come up before they give birth.
Yeah, I remember
But
you talking about that.
yeah,
I think it makes a lot of sense.
this video's kind of choppy and a little weird. But that you can see her that she's usually that even though she's starting the pre-birth movement right there, like she's starting to have contractions and is preparing to give birth. But
Mhm.
that gives you an idea. That's how they bask for me. That sunlight comes through like that, and they
Yeah.
utilize those that
Okay.
natural sunlight to bask. But you can see what she's doing there. It's kind of sped up and choppy video, but she's they're twisting and turning and all pretzel looking as they're getting ready
Yeah.
to deliver, and looks miserable to be honest. It looks
Just a bit.
like all women got to go through it. Much respect to the women of the humans and animal world for what they
Yeah,
have to go through because it does not
definitely.
look easy at all.
No, no, it sure does not. Yeah.
So yep, and then she started dropping some
Okay.
babies there, and then they just start pumping them out, man. They a
So
lot
that
of times
it's pretty
they
much just back to back to back to back.
pretty yeah. It's for the most part, unless the things that seems to slow things down are slugs. So if there's
Okay.
a slug in between, they usually struggle a bit more to pass a slug, and that actually is no doubt a cause of stillborns. I think quite
Hmm.
often in live bearers as well.
Yeah, that's a
That
shame.
if a slug is particularly odd shaped or just not not passing for whatever reason, then the babies can be just stuck behind it and they don't make it out alive in some cases. I
Yeah.
had a friend that had that where he had I think it was a Suriname or maybe it was a Peruvian boa that had a huge weird shaped slug, and then there was like two perfect babies behind it that were dead. When she finally passed it, and it took her like several hours to pass that slug. So that's the kind of theory there is that yeah, if they don't pass that quick enough, then you're running a risk of stillborns.
Yeah. Like if that was you, after how long would you go in there and try to push that out yourself to try to keep your process going?
Yeah, that's a good question. So now if I'm able to observe it, if I see a female struggling for more than maybe 20 or 30 minutes with a slug, then I'm considering maybe
Okay.
it's time to
That
go
quick,
in
huh?
there and intervene. I think so, just to err on the
Yeah.
side of caution because I think because you don't really know have all the babies broken out of their sac inside there
Yeah.
and they're rip roaring and ready to go, and now they're you
Sure. Now
know
they can't breathe and yeah.
yeah, so it's yeah, but you learn, unfortunately a lot of the stuff that we do, you have to learn from the you getting your ass kicked and the hard
Yeah.
experiences like that. So I have been lucky so far and that I haven't had a scenario in which a female struggled for more than maybe 20 or 30 minutes to pass a slug. But no doubt it's probably something I will experience and at
Yeah.
some point here as you
Can,
continue breeding them. So
can you tell visually whether or not they're about to pass a live baby or a slug right beforehand?
a lot of times you can, yeah. They
Okay.
it the actual you'll see the kind of movement is a little different. It looks awkward, and it's not as smooth. So usually a live baby that's kicking and squirming, well, not kicking, you know what I mean, um, a live baby that's ready to come out gets passed pretty quickly, and the contractions and the kind of movements are overall pretty. There's a flow to it. It's got a rhythm to it that looks pretty smooth overall, and then that baby gets pushed out relatively easily and it generally looks like it's a pretty smooth process, all things considered, for the female. um,
Okay.
when I see him pushing and pushing and pushing and there's really nothing happening there, it's almost always a slug. um, So
Fair
that's,
enough.
you can kind of expect that, and in fact, probably every time that I've seen that, it ended up being a slug, where it's like if that female's pushing for more than 2 or 3 minutes to get the next thing in succession out, then it's almost always a slug.
Yeah.
And but I've been lucky in that most of the litters, in particular the last 3 seasons, have been not a lot of slugs.
Yeah. It's
So
always what you want. That's awesome. So,
yeah,
hit a few questions before we get to the commercial break, but
sure.
Scott's asking, are the sacs somewhat adhesive like with chameleons?
You know, um, that's another thing that's been kind of interesting in my experience so far, is that I've had very few of them that were actually still in the sack. So it's a little sticky. I don't know if it's I don't, it doesn't seem to be like chameleons for sure.
Okay.
I've never seen anything. Although with chameleons, the babies are so born. I think maybe what he's referring to is like they'll kind of stick to the side of a leaf or something, and
Yeah.
you know I don't know if a baby emerald, if maybe that would be possible if it was like a larger tree trunk that they were dropping them into, or something. But in the setups I've done, I haven't seen anything like that, and all the babies except for maybe one were already completely out of the sack when she pushed them out. So
Okay.
I haven't seen that. Now I know that happens where they come out and they're still, and the mother actually in some cases will bite to get them out.
Yeah.
But I just haven't experienced it yet.
Okay. And
So
that kind of actually that segues well into this about Scott's comment saying if the umbilicus is still connected in the mom, that oxygen should
mhm.
still be flowing. But then if you consider that they may already be out of that sac by the time they give birth, then maybe that would be the exception to that kind of
Well, and
situation.
that's the thing. What I've seen so far, they're almost, I think, literally maybe one out of the 67 or 68 babies that are produced. I think one of them may have come out that was not already out of the sack.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah, I just haven't
That's
had it yet to
significant.
know. Yeah, to know
Yeah.
what the situation is there. But I think for sure if they bust out of the sack inside the mother and are stuck behind a slug for hours, maybe not 20, 30 minutes is probably still safe, but if it's hours, then I think they're at risk for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the experience of my friend has certainly suggested that, and I know other people said they've seen the same thing with live bears. So.
Okay. And then the last question on that front was, do they drop during low pressure systems?
I don't really think that seems to be totally the case,
Okay.
but I don't know for sure. What I've seen is that they I'd have to go back and look at the records and see if I marked down whether it was raining, or even just go back and refer to a weather chart to line it up and see if it was.
Yeah.
Once or twice it was a low pressure system, and I think at least once or twice it was raining outside, because I know that's a common thing with boas. A lot of people say, like, have you ever noticed a boa? They give birth when it's raining.
Hmm.
Um, and but I haven't. It's not been like totally consistent here. The thing that I've seen that's most
Okay.
consistent is once they're ready to go, they do that behavior where they kind of they're not stressed, but like they're kind of spastic, cruising around a lot. A little bit like, looks almost similar to how they act before ovulation, but then they mellow way, way, way down, and then they're like
Okay.
statues, and they kind of look like a statue in place for hours at a time.
Hmm.
And then, like I said, so far I've had 8 litters here, and out of all, they've all done the same pattern of they wait for the sun to come up, and then at some point after the sun, either right after it starts to come up or within a few hours afterwards, that's when they've all given birth. But other people have had
Cool.
them give birth in the afternoon and at night. So
Yeah.
um, w- because I've seen the consistency so far, and because of the way they're kept in the back room there with a completely natural light cycle from the sun,
Mm.
I'm inclined to think that that's probably what their natural inclination is to wait for the sun to come
Sure.
up. Why exactly that is, I don't know. I've thought maybe it's just a temperature thing. They just wait for it to warm up a bit.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. Don't know for sure. So that's the one thing I've seen that's been quite consistent, and it seems like my expectation, anyways, is that they'll continue to do that kind of general pattern. But you know how it is with reptiles, man. Every time you think you think you've got a pattern figured out.
Yeah.
It gets thrown off. So who knows?
They humble you
maybe
quick.
this year they'll all give birth at night. I have no fucking clue.
Yeah.
Until they do it.
So our last question before our break from Steve: have you ever left slugs in, and if so, did she attempt to eat them?
Yes, I have left them in there, and to try to see if the female would eat them. And
Okay.
I even tried offering,
Okay.
just to see. You know what I mean? Like to see if she would take it, because I know that the boas will do that, and emeralds definitely will do it. I think all corrales have probably been observed doing that.
Okay.
But no, I haven't seen them eat it yet. No doubt it'll happen probably at some point though.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just haven't witnessed it yet.
Okay. Well, all right, cool. So we will hit the commercial break real quick. Stick around, everybody. Hold tight, and we'll be back here in a few minutes.
Set your reminder for the second annual Reptile Breeder Show happening in downtown Los Angeles, March 1st, thrown by KG&D over at the Bomb Project. I happened to made it to the first show, and it was one of the best times ever had at such a really cool, unique show. Make sure you set your reminders, and if you're in the SoCal area, I highly recommend you pull up to this show and see the kind of benders that they have bending. Some of the top quality ball python productions and other really cool species of reptiles will be at this show. So again, the Reptile Breeder Show, the second annual Reptile Breeder Show happening in downtown Los Angeles, March 1st. Please set your reminder. Go to the reptilebreedershow.com, get your tickets, get all further information, and you can also give them a follow on Instagram. And I'll definitely see you at the second annual Reptile Breeder Show happening March 1st. Cheers! For the #1 PVC enclosures in the reptile game, no better place to visit than Focus Cube Habitats. Excited for today's sponsor, Focus Cube Habitats, #1 enclosures in the reptile game by far. Everything you see behind me are 3x2x2 PVC design enclosures by Steven and Ashley over at Focus Cube Habitats. They're based out of Texas. If you head over to their website, you can select from over 30 plus different enclosure designs that they've done. Two of the hardest working people in the reptile hobby today, and I'm so excited to add more Focus Cube enclosures. So much again, Steven and Ashley, I appreciate the 5+ years of partnerships that we've had together. Looking forward to growing more. Head over to focuscubehabitats.com, head over to their YouTube channel, subscribe, and check them out on Instagram. Thank you so much, Focus Cube Habitat. When you think about building a good community and being a leader of that community, nobody comes to mind better than Mark Hager over at Texas Chondros. That's right. Make sure you head over to TX Chondros on Instagram, and also head over to Mark's website, see what he has available green tree python wise, and be ready for quite the 2025 green tree python breeding season out of Mark Hager. He's a veteran in the green tree python game, one of the best and nicest breeders in the green tree python game. He's been putting on the whole state of Texas for as long as I've known him. So if you want to see all the amazing other chondro keepers out of the state of Texas, another good reason to go follow Mark Hager over at TX Chondros on Instagram. And again, head over to his website, texaschondros.com. You can find all the links in the description below. Thank you so much, Mark Hager, for supporting the trap. Cheers!
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for waiting through the break. I said this last show, but I'll say it again. I love the commercial break from a selfish standpoint, because having a little moment to gather yourself an hour into the episode is it's pretty nice. So
it is. But it's also, for me, I think it's kind of interesting too, because since I watch a lot of the episodes on the network, sometimes I forget. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm on this episode. I'm not just watching the, you know what I mean? It's like it's a little off, throws you off every now and again. I'm like, shit, I gotta be ready to talk again. You know what I mean?
No, that happened to me back like 4 or 5 years ago when I did an episode on Morelia Python Radio. It was only audio, and I was like just cleaning snakes while I was doing it. And I was listening to them do the intro, and I'm like, all right, when they say something to me, I'm on the show. I'm not just listening to the show. It's me actually this time. I had to like give myself a pep talk. Like, when they say, hey, what's going on? You're the one who answers this week.
Yeah. So, I figured by now I would have spaced out at least once, not realizing, you know what I mean? Like coming back from the commercial or something, I'm just be sitting here like zoning out, doing some other shit. And you're like, oh, hello.
Just get your rabbit on your lap, just petting the rabbit.
She's been good so far. I don't know where that little shit is, but now that we mentioned her, she'll probably be showing up. She's I think she's popped up pretty much every episode at this point. Yeah. So she'll probably make an appearance. But right now she's not bothering me, so I'm happy about that.
cool.
She's funny. We had no intention of getting her, obviously. One of the neighbors, I can't remember how did we find her? Oh, she was on my girl was on a walk, and she texted me. She's like, oh, there's like looks like a pet rabbit or something in the neighbor's yard. Can you come get it? Because of course I'm like the animal dude for everything, and so
Yeah.
I'm like, I knew immediately. I'm like, I just got a feeling this is gonna end up being a pet. And so sure enough, go over, and she was tame, so I was able to just go snag her, and then
Okay.
yeah, we couldn't find the owner. It ended up being that one of the neighbors just decided they didn't want her anymore and just let
Oh,
her outside.
all
So I was
right.
like, oh, that's cool.
Maybe that does happen in Florida after all.
It does. But you know what's funny? She can be such a pain in the ass that every now and again I'm like, even though that wasn't cool, I kind of get it. Because sometimes I want to just put you outside too. I never would, of course, but you know.
Yeah.
Anyways, enough rabbit talk.
Well,
Probably most
I
people
wanna-
on here just talking. Just when they think rabbit, they're only thinking snake food. But
True. Yeah, I want to take a look at some of these babies that you sent me. So these are
Yeah.
last year's.
yep, yeah. If it's got the 24,
24.
then those would be last
Yeah.
year's. Yeah, so those are an L1 is for litter one. So that was white rose. Yeah, so that was white rose's litter. Any of the ones that are marked that way.
Okay.
So that's so these are most of these are I think those are probably like a month or two old pictures, so they already all look quite different than that even.
Sure.
Either with more green coming in or like a paler orange color to them.
This one's super interesting with that like diamondy pattern almost, where the crossbars don't go very far, but they're very like present and defined.
Yeah, that's and that's if you look at the mother white rose, she's got some of that going on. That's influence probably much more from her than the father.
Okay.
He's got more of a circular kind of shape to his pattern overall. But yeah, I love these babies, and that's one of the ones that's more than likely a holdback. And that
Nice.
first one's probably not the best picture of that animal. It doesn't really show the pattern and the color as well, but that's a really nice high white one. It looks a lot like she does.
Okay.
And is going to be no doubt a killer animal. And one of the things what's interesting about this, so I've obviously have people that have contacted me. I've had people that have got some babies from me already, and I've had a lot of people reach out, and over the last few weeks, or in some cases, some people have been reaching out for a couple of years now. And I think one of the things I've observed, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, is that there's definitely not a clarity or not enough clarity from people on a few things regarding emerald color, northerns in particular.
Okay.
Because I have some people that'll contact me about animals like that, and they're like, well, do you have anything that's like high white? And I'm like, if you don't think that's high white, you don't know what you're looking at yet. Cause
Yeah.
you don't know what that snake's going to look like as an adult.
Yeah.
And but I think what it is in some cases, they're expecting like, I make the joke. It's like some people, it's like they're expecting basically third generation, top 0.5% holdback animals, and it's like, dude, there's not that many that are of that caliber with northerns yet. You see the most extreme examples. You got to come back down to earth if you're going to be able to just get those kind of babies. But I think part of that confusion is just it's an understandable one, in that
Sure.
Because people think that the northerns don't gain any white, that they see what a baby looks like and they think that's its final white, you know what I mean? It's not going to gain anymore. And what I've seen with them is that the animals, like I said, that have a kind of bolder and generally kind of larger and blockier or more diamond shaped pattern, there tends to be kind of a fill color in the center of that. That's not really as present on the more typical phenotype, and that those animals tend to gain the most white as they grow. But you might not necessarily see that until the third or fourth shed. And I don't know if I sent you the pictures of that, but like one of the highest white babies I produced so far was probably one of the darkest, and most probably an animal most people would have ignored.
Tell me if you see it, because I'm
it's
not
not
sure
in this litter. I probably forgot to send that. I remember when I sent that,
Okay.
I was like, shit,
No
there's a
worries.
bunch I should have sent.
Yeah. No.
It was from Amarella's litter in 2023, so it's a little over a year old.
Oh, okay. I think these babies are all.
These are all from these are all just anywhere from basically 3 to 5 months old or so.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're all still pretty young, just starting to go through that change.
Yeah.
So they're all like they've had 2-3 sheds by now, and that's when you start to see the color changes really kind of kicking in, is around that 3rd or 4th shed, and then you have a better idea of what they're doing. But again, you still can't be 100% sure. Some of them go in a direction you don't expect, or and that can go in either way. It can go a lot darker than you expected, or a lot lighter.
Yeah.
And, but the white is definitely something that I think is a little misunderstood. So I've had a few people that have contacted me, and it's like they're like wanting more and more white, and they've opted not to get one. Or I had one guy, he's a friend of mine, and he ended up getting a different animal from me, but I felt bad because he passed on an animal that was. I told him, I'm like, it's gonna be killer, man. If you want a pretty damn high white one, this is gonna be the one. But he just didn't understand yet. It didn't look high enough white to him at that time.
Yeah.
So he passed on it. But I showed him. I'm like, well, this one would have been one to get. So
Yeah.
I think with some of those people, they just gotta kind of think it through a little bit more.
And I feel like within time of more of these, being produced, and then being able to see through pages like yours on Instagram, progression of these animals,
Yeah.
And I think for good reason. A lot of time people can be skeptical of the reptile salesperson telling them this is what this animal will look like.
Sure.
And
especially because you can't guarantee any of it. You know what I mean?
Right. Like
there's no way that you can say, oh, this is absolutely going to go in this exact direction.
Yeah. And then, especially if for the people who are comparing wild caught to captive bred prices, obviously we've talked about why that shouldn't be done, but let's say that's still your mindset. You're new, and then you're hearing from this guy, this animal should look like what you want it to. Then there's going to be some hesitancy there. But then I think, with the evidence being presented in front of them, then in the future that might be a gamble, so to speak, that more people are willing to take. Even though it's really not really a gamble, it's more just understanding what these animals are. But it might seem like a gamble to you up front if you don't know any better.
Sure. And I think with Northerns too, that there's we all kind of live a little bit in edge shadow. It's true. It's like, man, you know what I mean? You see Ed's work, and it's like we're all kind of aspiring to that, but at the same time, it's just like, shit, man. In a way, it makes us all look like we're not doing anything, at least not yet. But I say that obviously joking, but like,
sure.
But anyway, but I do think that I think there's a truth to that, in that you see some of these really extreme basins, and just the insane amount of white on it, and if that's really all you're looking for, because there's a few people I've had contact me that they weren't sure what direction they wanted to go. With it's like, well, I like Northerns and I like basins, but I'm really into the super crazy high white stuff, and that's what I want as soon as possible. And in that case, I'm like, if you want the really, really insane Ed Marino stuff, that you just got to go that route.
Yeah, just gotta take a second mortgage out on your house, and cross your fingers.
But I think we'll have we'll be not in the same exact ballpark, but I think people will be really surprised at what is possible with Northerns in just a few more years. It'll start becoming a lot more apparent. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, I think that's kind of a no-brainer.
There's so few lineages out, really. I know that's one of the things we wanted to talk about. There's really, you've got the most famous thing, which is the Ms. Willie line stuff.
Yeah.
And then you've got in Europe, they've done some amazing work out there, like Magnus and Glenn Bogue, and I'm probably forgetting half the names. But they've really done some fantastic work out there, getting some line breeding going and getting some new high white stuff, and crossing that with the Ms. Willie line stuff. And you got some of that going on here in the States as well. And so I think over time, and hopefully some of the stuff I'm working with and will add to that as well. And I think that it's going to get really exciting in a few more years. We're right at the very kind of beginning of seeing what's possible with them.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that as the night progresses. But before we get too far away from Steve's question, kind of more of a clarifying question about the temps you're keeping your babies at.
So they're the way I keep my babies is not really very dissimilar from a kind of traditional rack with back heat.
Okay.
I keep them in tubs with the lids on and just highly ventilated, and so they're kept um, in a storage plastic can't speak tonight, plastic resin storage cabinet with
Okay.
heat cable on the back of that, so it functions pretty much just like a
Yeah,
rack
sure.
system. And so I do pretty typical, mid 80s basically. They're at mid 80s, low to mid 80s for most of the time of the most of the year, and then I drop that down at night just like I do the adults. So then at night it's 78ish, something
Okay.
like that. During the
Pretty.
summer it probably gets a little warmer, so sometimes in the summer it's like 88,
Yeah.
but generally pretty typical temperatures. And this is one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of the babies do seem to move away from that heat more so than tend to stay towards it.
Sure. That
But
makes
I suspect that has more to do with the fact that they don't like the way that back heat feels in comparison to like a natural ambient warmth or even potentially maybe a different heat source.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily indicative that they want to be that cool. Because I've kept, I've established a few juvenile wild caught ones in very high ambient, high 80s, low 90s, even ambient, and they seem to
Okay.
be doing great in that. They digest meals really fast, and it all seemed to work well. So at some point, I'd like to try to keep them ambient as well and a little warmer,
Okay.
and see if that makes a difference. And maybe they do want to stay as cool as they're tending to, but is that I have my suspicions it has more to do with they just are trying to get away from that kind of less than ideal back heat.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
But they do well, at that temperature. That's still the general temperature I recommend most people keep them is in that low to mid 80s range.
Yeah.
So it's just an easy, kind of plug and play range to go with.
Cool.
I see Pat put in there, rest in peace, Rico.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I mentioned it, but yeah, Rico's of course one of the ones that was doing awesome work.
Yep.
With
Found in
Northern's,
Miss Willie line.
yeah, and other stuff too. Not just, I mean, he's
Yeah.
most known for Ms. Willie, but
For sure.
he had a really awesome Northern and Basin collection going. He had some
Yeah.
killer
I
stuff.
think he still has the world record of 10 emerald litters in a year, if I have that correct.
Something like that. Yeah, I've heard
Yeah.
that. I don't know the exact number, but
I think
yeah, definitely
Patrick,
right
you
in that
probably would
ballpark.
know that for sure, but I
Yeah,
want to say that it was, I want to say, if I remember the story right, that he went 10 for 10. So
I've heard. Yeah, that's what I heard as well.
Yeah.
So I've gone and
pretty damn impressive.
yeah, I've gone and perused that old Signal herp site, and yeah, I've drooled over that many a times.
Yeah.
So it just sucks that Wayback Machine doesn't archive a lot of pictures because there's so many things where it's just like all that's left is the thumbnail, a little really low res thumbnail, and it's like I'd
Yeah.
love to see that the full resolution picture, but
Yeah.
Patrick says what he is. That's probably the year he had USCBB basins on King Snake for $750. Can we travel back in time?
Yeah. It's like,
Because I would love that.
yeah, Patrick loves reminding you how much the snakes that you like used to be, and you
Yeah.
can't get them for that anymore. So
Yeah, a lot of those prices are just long gone.
like he loves to tell me how he would get Malukan scrubs for like $200 or whatever. And that might even be high. So
Yeah.
gotta love it. So
Emeralds, I don't remember emeralds ever being like, well, the Northerns anyways, they weren't like, well, I mean, they were pretty cheap, but they were never like dirt cheap. They were actually
Sure.
fairly comparable, to what they are now. But definitely a lot of other species that used to be dirt cheap that are way, way, way above now.
Yeah. So
Pat's
thanks,
saying
Patrick.
$100
Yeah.
Malucans. Yeah.
If that's what I had spent on them, I would have exponentially more than I have now. But I don't. So yeah, let's see. This is another one of the litter mates from that first.
Yep, and that one just shed recently. It looks quite a bit better than that already.
Okay.
That's the problem with, it's like I like keeping them back, but I also don't because you just want to keep every single one of them because it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it looks even better and it's doing great, and you just want to
Yeah.
keep every single one of them. But
And then
that's
so
a
this is
badass
getting
one.
into Anaconda stuff then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, into the Anaconda phase babies, and so that was from what is that?
So cool.
2418. So yeah, that was from Big Dottie, which that was she's a really cool interesting looking anaconda face female, and yeah, she had a higher count than I was expecting too. I can't remember offhand the exact number, but the first litter that I did that I got anaconda face from was Mama Condas, and there was only two quote unquote full conda babies. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And then there was one the half and half look that kind of almost like a low expression, and then another one that kind of looked low expression. So, but then I think Big Dottie had maybe 8 condas in that litter.
Okay.
It was like I think it was a little more than 50% of the litter, if I remember correctly, and made some killer ones. And this is killing me. I've got people that are wanting condos right now, and I know they're probably thinking like, dude, when are you gonna let me know? Because I'm like, well, I just gotta pick my holdbacks, but it's fucking hard because there's a few that are really similar to each other, and it makes it even almost harder to pick which one. And but that's a killer looking one. And
one thing that I have found as a very useful trick for picking out holdbacks is producing a new clutch that is significantly nicer than the one that you are deciding whether or not to pick, what to keep from. That has helped me a lot with my scrub pythons, where I'm I need to keep all of these, which means I have to get rid of some of these.
And that's where I'm at this year. That's basically where I'm at. Is it's like there's a few, especially because I had so many condas born last year that it's like, all right, shit, I can't keep every single one of these. It's absurd. And so now I'm trying to make that decision of like, all right, I just could keep my absolute favorites and let a few go to a few select people, and then but it's tough because I know Ed has said that before. It's like every year you're producing more and more stuff. Pat says another useful tool is to make them all holdbacks. Well, that's been the strategy, and it's my preferred strategy, but it's not feasible at a certain point. So you got to start making
if one of the a house right across the street from me just went up for rent recently, so maybe I'll get the second scrub house.
Yep, multiple homes, just to contain every single holdback.
Yep. So then, is this a different?
That's a sibling. Two different, two siblings, but they look very similar.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, those are killer. Those are some of my favorite reds that I produced. There was a couple of other nice ones too, but yeah, super nice. And I get a lot of people that ask about the difference between the red condas and the green. I haven't noticed I haven't raised enough of them to know for sure. But I haven't so far noticed a real stark difference in how they look once they're at that year and a half old marker. But they look obviously way different when they're babies, and I think the reds are more stunning when they're babies probably. I guess depending on the look you have, but I mean it's pretty hard that I mean if you could to be.
This is obviously just a dream, like dreaming, but like if that snake could be 5 feet long.
Oh, dude,
that would be like the most valuable snake in the world.
It would be insane. Yeah, I mean that would be incredible. And I mean, who knows? Maybe figure out maybe something pops up at some point where they just there's no OCC takes place, and you get that as an adult, but I doubt it. But it would be killer. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing those grow up a little bit, although I may have to let one or two of those go. I'm not sure.
So then these are green siblings from the same litter?
Yep, and that one's going to be that's a good example of one, although it is pretty obvious I think to most people that's got a lot of white already.
Yeah.
Especially on the lower half of the body, but I would suspect that's going to clean up a good bit on the front half of the body as well.
Okay.
And, I think that's going to be a pretty spectacular animal, so that one's definitely staying here.
Yeah. And so that's interesting to be from an anaconda litter and then being so.
Yeah, it's one of the higher white ones. Cool. Well, see, that's the thing with what the anaconda face looks to me like is that it appears to be like a reduction in white, and so some of the animals, like the one animal that I have from the first anaconda phase litter that I had in 2022, the back half of the body is quite a lot of white. But if you look at that snake, to me, it looks like, okay, if it just didn't have the white reduced, it would have been a high white animal. And so when it's low expression conda phase, it actually still kind of is like it's got that 50-50 look. At least that's what I'm theorizing. Again, I could be wrong. But
Yeah, no, it's definitely
you know, it's funny. I see that comment from Patrick. He said that's what I did. Neighbors moved out. I rented their place
yeah.
too. It's pretty funny. He actually did the shit we were joking about.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
funny.
That's how you know when you're fully committed to this, is when you're paying a full
I mean, it's a
rent
smart
and you're-
move. It's a smart move, you know.
Oh yeah, and especially with
Well,
Patrick's setup.
depending
under-
on who you ask, probably it's a smart move.
Yeah.
If you're
True.
yeah, and you see more variety right there in that Conda phase. You know what I mean? That's another kind of difference in the color and pattern. And
But I mean,
that's one of the
comparing
ones.
this to a red baby, that a
Oh,
red
yeah,
baby
completely
anaconda
different.
and a green baby anaconda. That red is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Now that one, I don't think it really shows well in that picture, but that's one of the ones that I'm definitely holding from this year. That you can kind of see the tail is almost like a yellowish color.
Yeah.
It's a little distinct. It's the first the first emeralds I've seen where the tail almost looks like a coddle lure. Like it almost looks distinct enough, like it would be.
Okay.
I don't think it is. I think that it just maybe happens to be pretty light.
Yeah,
and,
it's kind of
but
coincidence.
it was kind of at first I looked at it, I'm like, what the hell is the deal with this? It almost looks like a coddle lure, and so I was kind of confused. But it's still distinct enough to where I'm going to keep them and see what they look like. And yeah, somebody Lisa says, did they ever have babies? What does she mean?
Yeah, Lisa, can you clarify? Because there's a bit of a delay on the comments from the live, so
Yeah,
we're
sure.
probably missing exactly what you're referencing there.
Sure.
But
yeah, you can see Steve says looks like a yellow.
The yellow
Yeah,
anaconda.
it almost,
I mean,
the
yeah,
tail has that. It's
honestly,
pretty distinct.
it's
pretty
really a good
distinct. So
comparison.
yeah, I definitely am like, all right, well, I'm gonna see what they do. Hold on to those for sure.
I mean, as someone who's I've had emeralds. I don't right now. The yellow has always been, I feel like, what has drawn me the most. The one basin that I had for a while from Ed was had almost an entirely yellow base color, and that was just like that snake just blew me away.
Yeah, I remember that was a badass one.
Yeah, that was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Like I'm working heavy on that for the northerns. I've got a few, founder ones that have pretty high yellow, and then some holdbacks that should be even higher yellow, and then we'll see in time how that goes.
So
I think there's a lot of potential there. Another awesome.
I like that face though, man.
Yeah,
yellow face.
And look at the head markings on some of the condos are really cool.
Yeah,
they have a really really nice beautiful yellow on the face, and I think it's just killer.
Yeah,
this is why it's so hard to pick which one.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, especially when
anybody who I've talked to about them, it's just I'm not, I'm delaying just because I'm ridiculous to try to pick out which ones.
Because when the differences are
ones.
When the differences are as minimal as they are with these anaconda phase, I can only imagine, because for me, like with the barneck scrubs, for instance, there could be a pretty significant variance within one clutch. So I feel like it's much less difficult than picking between that and that and that. Like, how do you even begin?
It's hard, man. It's hard.
Consider it. Yeah, like.
That one is definitely staying. That one is if you zoom in, you look at the head on that animal. Even though I don't think I got it real close.
Yeah, but a lot of yellow coming through on the.
Yeah, real heavy yellow on that one, and just a really cool color to it. And some of them, they got kind of like a bluish gray tone to the pattern, and others it's more bold black. And so we'll see in time.
Yeah, it's just really light colored compared to the other ones, I feel like.
Yeah. And so there's one I have that can't remember if I sent a picture of that. The one that's probably the most yellowish base color that that one. That one's got some that one, if anything, will probably end up having a bit of a kind of that mustard color to it, I suspect.
Yeah.
So mustard on the beach. But so we'll see, we'll see what they all do. And yeah, it's a lot of cool stuff, man. I think that's why I always laugh when people say like there's no, emeralds are boring. I'm just like, all right. Okay.
People say that?
Some people say it, yeah.
Okay, so we were getting into a third litter of anaconda phase. Jeez.
That thing's killer. That thing you know what? I was nervous because that one wouldn't eat. It was mean as hell.
Really?
Wouldn't eat. Yeah. Bite me every chance it got. It was striking like crazy, but wouldn't eat. tried everything, live fuzzy, tried, everything under the sun, didn't eat. And it just finally ate the first time the other day. I think it was like last week. And what got it to take was a pretty huge hopper, like bordering on small adult mouse size, to where it was like, I'm kind of shocked it went for something that big rather than get intimidated by it. And that's one thing that's been interesting. And I actually talked to Ed about this the other day, and he's observed the same kind of thing. And as you're getting babies started, you got to kind of feel it out and test some of the individuals, like particularly if they don't want frozen thawed to start, where they just don't respond to a frozen thawed meal, which emeralds seem to be a little more inclined to want live over chondros, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree.
But some of the individuals will not really respond to like a slow moving fuzzy, but they'll go for a really, really crazed, hyped up, spastic hopper instead, or vice versa. So you got to kind of try that out and see. Like I said, I had tried with that being a smaller baby, and I figured that the fuzzies would get it going, and it wanted nothing to do with them. And then a pretty huge, like I said, basically a small adult mouse slammed it. So I was like, all right,
hey,
on board now.
It works. So Lisa meant, do they have
yellow babies? So yes, but I don't understand exactly when, and it seems to be extremely rare. So the only one I'm aware of that I've seen pictures of was a picture. It was something Tony Nikolai posted. It was like, somebody else posted a picture that he had posted years back. And if I remember correctly, that was from an anaconda face to anaconda face pairing. But it looked like it was like, I think it was like one or two babies that were yellow like that. But I mean, they were yellow, like yellow.
Okay.
So interesting. I just don't know any more about it than that as to how frequent it occurs or why it occurs. And but they were bona fide yellow babies. So not like as intense yellow as like a chondro, but I mean, they were yellow.
Well, hopefully a couple generations from now, we will be seeing that all the time.
Yeah. I'm curious too. It made me wonder, and I think I know the answer to this. I don't think has there ever been a baby chondro that was born green the way that some of these emeralds are born green.
Not that I've seen.
I've never seen it. So
yeah, I had a baby chondro one time born like basin orange, but
that's I've seen that. Yeah. A few times I've seen, not personally, but I've seen pictures of that.
But then it grew up into just a completely normal looking adult. So
yeah, I don't know if the yellow, I don't know if the yellow ones that were the yellow emeralds that were born, and I don't know if they survived into adulthood. If they did, I have no idea what they looked like, if they looked different. So, but I know that I believe Igor, I can't remember his last name. I would probably butcher it if I tried to say it. He's over in Suriname, and I believe he said when that topic came up of yellow babies, I believe he said he's seen them before, but very rare.
Interesting. So yeah,
and it must have been, my assumption is that probably would have been from like a gravid female that was collected and then dropped them.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anybody, and this would be good if anybody in the chat knows, I'm not aware of any footage, any even real documentation of observations of wild gravid ones giving birth, or really like much observation or documentation of the babies.
Yeah.
There seems to be very little known about their behavior in the wild. Not a whole lot of pictures or observations of them either.
Yeah.
So I think there's still a lot to learn there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, just scrolling through these babies is just mesmerizing. I can definitely see why it is such a struggle.
I mean, it's and when they're, especially when they're still in the process of changing, and you're like, shit.
Yeah.
I would have picked you yesterday. Now I want to pick you. You know what I mean? It's like they're hard. That head looks so awesome like that.
I know, right?
Freeze that at that. Yeah, with that partially green head like that, looks super cool.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
But yeah, they're an amazing species, man. I'm definitely been having fun with them and feel lucky to work with them.
So we've talked obviously a lot about what you've been producing. To kind of get into the rest of the phenotypes, I guess at this point, before we get into any lineages, the one that we really haven't talked a whole lot about is the patternless.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the state of the kind of patternless project, and then what's been kind of done to figure out what exactly is going on there?
Well, so my understanding of it, there's been definitely a lot less pairings that have been done
Steve
with
is
patterns.
offering his help with your grow out
For another
addiction.
set of
So,
programs.
man, I mean, what a generous guy, man. Gosh, everyone needs a friend like Steve Doss to.
Well, yeah. And last time he offered on behalf of Dennis McNamara to buy
Yeah,
dinner for me. So yeah, he's
damn. So he's gonna. Steve, wow, what a generous person, man. This is awesome.
he's got Rex. He says there.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Thanks,
Put him.
Lucid. Appreciate that, Lucid. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
oh, yeah.
so patternless. So yeah. So I personally haven't. I have one patternless animal that I picked up that I may have to probe it and actually see if it's correct. I thought it was supposed to be male. Hasn't
Okay.
done anything yet when I paired it, so
Mm.
maybe it's not. But it's also still it's probably on the younger side. I wouldn't expect it's more than 4, maybe 5 years old. Not
Okay.
a real huge animal, so maybe just not mature yet.
Okay.
Or but I'm still, like we've talked about before, I'm still trying to kind of make sense of why some of them will be really eager breeders and some of them don't, and some of them seem to take a year or two off here and there with the males.
Yeah.
And I don't, there's still 95% of that is all a mystery to me. Hopefully that animal will do something, whether it's my fault because it's actually a female, and of course it's not doing anything paired up with another female. Could be the case, but I don't really think that's the case. I think it just hasn't kicked in breeding yet. So we'll see. But from what I've seen, from what little I've seen of the patternless pairings, it seems to be almost identical to the kind of results you would get with Anaconda phase.
Okay.
Where a patternless animal bred to a normal, you're going to get some partial patternless animals. I don't know if I don't know if you could say that they're full patternless, some of the babies that come out of those pairings, because most
Okay.
of them still have a few blotches here and there.
Then would you describe them closer to like Anaconda phase then?
No, not really. And that's one of the things that's, I think, would be
Hmm.
good to try to clarify. I maybe should have put more pictures up. I should have probably sent more pictures there.
Oh, all good.
But the ones that I consider to be patternless, even if they still have a few blotches here and there, it's not like the Anaconda phase. They have
Okay.
big sections of the body that are completely patternless, meaning there's
Yeah.
no white and there's no dark pattern.
Okay.
But they'll have little bits of either or. They'll have either a little bit of white, splotch here or there, or a little bit of black here and there. But
Okay.
they're like, a good 70-80% patternless,
Yeah.
and pretty clean patternless overall. And then there's
Okay.
a few individuals that I've seen both with the northerns and the basins that are, basically truly completely patternless, where it's just a totally clean green animal.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
those are really cool looking. And yeah, and I've seen some half patternless stuff, which that's one of the things I thought was interesting. So there's been plenty of examples of what appears to be like a half patternless animal, where I
Okay.
believe, going off memory, I can't remember if it's. I want to say it's like the opposite of what I see with those kind of half and half condas, where the front half of the body is patterned, but still kind of sporadic, and then the back half will be completely patternless.
Okay.
I may be mixing that up because, again, I'm just going offhand. I don't have any animals like that personally yet.
Mm.
But given the fact that I've seen some kind of similarities there between the way the patternless look and the Anaconda phase, I'd guess it's probably operating pretty similar. And
Okay.
maybe there's cross compatibility there. Between breeding those two together. I think more time will tell how that pans out. But I think they're really cool looking snakes, and I definitely would like to get a few more of those. But they don't seem to come in. The actual true patternless seem to be less common than the Anaconda phase are. And yeah, that's all I really know about them. I haven't. There's very few people that are working with them.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know anybody that's got like a big collection of them or a whole lot of those going
Okay.
yet. So it's pretty much. I know Mike Stefani has a real nice one,
Yeah.
And it seems like everybody that has them just has like one. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They got
sure.
one. You just get one that shows up every now and again, and
Yeah.
and
So
and so
then
there's still a lot of work to be done there.
my guess then is a patternless to patternless pairing has never been made, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
It may have been done at some point before, and some of that gets tricky too because I've like you'll hear people say like, oh, I bred a patternless to an anaconda phase before, back in the day, but I think in some of those cases it was like it's the kind of misnomer of calling a really light pattern anaconda phase, calling it a patternless,
Yeah, fair enough.
because I've definitely seen that, like animals that I would consider to be anaconda phase. I've seen quite a few, paler, kind of more faint pattern anaconda phase that are labeled as patternless animals, even by, well-respected people. That I would just disagree on what
Sure.
the phenotype was there. So yeah, definitely more to explore there, and we'll see how that goes in the coming years.
Okay.
But
So I
they're
think
cool.
the last one, and if there's more, correct me if I'm wrong, but that we really haven't touched on are these quote unquote new locale animals with
Mhm.
the head spots. So the namesake of that, where did that come from? Is it truly a different locality, or just like, hey, we get these weird head spotty ones now and someone deemed them new locale?
I think it's probably more so that I think it originated, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe it originated primarily from a few examples that I think Tony Nicolai had back in the day, and I
Okay.
think maybe a few other people as well had them. I think Rico may have had one similar, and maybe even Ed and a few other guys did as well. But I
Okay.
believe
So not very new locality.
no, and it's definitely not locality like exclusive. Now
Okay.
it could be that maybe originally there was a kind of a few animals found in a specific little micro locality or little region
Yeah.
that had, where several of those animals were found. But generally speaking, at least in modern terms, the new locality it's really a misnomer. It can pop up in any of them, and I'm in agreement with what Ed feels about it, or at least my understanding of how he feels about the head spot thing, and that essentially that can pop up randomly in
Okay.
even in basins as well.
Hmm.
And I think I agree with him as well in that it you'll probably see that pop up more often in line breeding, just high white animals in general, because the more white comes in on the body, it seems to go higher and higher up the neck, and then starts
Yeah.
popping up on the head. And what's also interesting about that is that I have a few animals, even a few that were born here, that they basically have the marking. They have the exact same marking of the new locale, quote unquote, head spots. There's just not the white layer on top of it, but the dark layer is there.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
it seems to
Interesting.
be something where, that seems to be the case. Now, and I'm also not aware of there being like a clearly demonstrated case of like breeding two animals with head spots, with strong head spots together, and having like a bunch of the babies have it or anything like it. I don't
Yeah.
know how it's passed on. I do believe that it's popped up in litters where at least one parent had it. So there's something inheritable there, but exactly how it works,
Yeah.
I personally certainly don't know. But as far as to clarify on whether it's tied to a specific locality, no, it's
Okay.
at least not now. Maybe back in the day, maybe there was
Yeah.
some more truth to that, but
Sure.
it's certainly not exclusive, anyways.
Okay.
And those are cool. Yeah, definitely a cool look on them. I don't go as crazy about it as some people seem to do. I know some people are really really into that look.
Yeah.
Um, I've had it, like I said, I've had two animals that had it. The one, and both of those examples were shown. I have the one darker animal where the dark coloration came in and kind of obscured those white head markings.
Yeah.
And then they had that pretty extreme one of the most extreme head spots I've ever seen on that one juvenile that
Yeah.
unfortunately, came in and didn't make it, past 5 weeks into quarantine.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but there are some definitely some badass ones out there, and those markings on basins seems to be a little different when you see them.
Okay.
It's not quite as like perfectly circular. Not that all of them on northerns are either.
Hmm.
But Ed has some pretty interesting markings on some of those basins, and like he said, it seems to just start creeping in more frequently the higher white they get, and once they get
Yeah. It
into
makes sense.
multi generations line breeding. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense that would go that route. Just the more white you have, the more, why not
It's
have
got
it
to
pop up
start
on the
popping
head?
up somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as like naturally occurring, I guess if you want to say that, phenotypes, are there any that we haven't really touched on yet?
I think we've covered pretty. I mean, well, there's the pixel emeralds, and those have
Okay.
popped up a few times.
Yeah.
Actually, some of the earlier records of those go back like many decades. I think.
Oh,
I
really?
cannot. Yeah, I can't think of the name of the book, but there was a few that popped up in an old book that I believe from the '60s. I want to say,
Oh,
or
wow.
'70s. There was an example of one back
Okay.
then, so you'll see that. And they seem to happen. At least one or two of them pops up every few years.
Yeah.
In recent years, I know that one of those situations a few years ago, there was a group that was imported, and those all perished. I don't know all the details of them, but those,
Oh, okay.
I think it was just the typical regurg.
Yeah.
You know, the typical emerald, wild caught emerald situation there
Yeah.
with those. And then Ron St. Pierre has the pixel animal
Mm.
at the moment, and then I
Okay.
think there was probably. I think there's been a few more of them over the last, probably 10 years that have
Yeah.
popped up here and there. Certainly looks like something that would be inheritable,
Sure.
but nobody's succeeded in proving that yet. So that's pretty much
So
the
there's never been a
situation. But
litter from a pixel animal in any fashion, male or female?
not that was, to my knowledge, not that's been produced in captivity. I think there's been one or two cases where where a gravid female dropped those babies in captivity, either here or in at the
Mm.
exporter's facility. But I'm not aware of an actual
Okay.
effort put into a pairing where something was produced there. But I mean, it would be a surprise if that wasn't an inheritable thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It
Did-
certainly looks like it would be, and especially how many of them over the years have shown up in pictures, and it's like such a
Yeah,
consistent
sure.
look that I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Especially if the look is kind of consistent from one animal to the next. It's
Mhm.
like this random mutation isn't going to just pop up over and over again.
Yeah.
Twice, okay, but like if you get to like 10 times, it's like this, there's got to be something to it.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, I remember, like, when I worked at the importer back in the day, when we would dig through ball python shipments, you would see, like, we were, we were probably watching all sorts of stuff slip through our fingers that if we'd had more sense, we would have held everything instead of
Yeah.
breeding these little interesting anomalies to each other. But, I remember picking up on things like that, where it's like you look through a group of, 500 ball pythons or something, and you'd find like two or three of them that it's like, these are probably clutch mates. This looks so consistent. This
Yeah, sure.
anomaly in the color or pattern, whatever the visual markers were, it's like, this is almost certainly a genetic thing. But who knew at that point that holding on to those kind of relatively minor differences and pairing them together could produce all sorts of crazy shit.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, so that's that. And then there have been calico northerns as well,
Yeah,
for sure. And then there's the melanistic stuff as
sure.
well.
Yeah,
Neither of which I've seen reproduced successfully.
yeah.
So far anyways. And I think with the calicos, if I remember correctly, there's been multiple cases of that as well, over the last
Oh, okay,
10, 20, 50, 25 years, maybe even. I don't know the
sure.
exact timeline, but certainly more than one example of those showing up, and in basins as well.
Yeah,
So that's one thing that's interesting too, is that, you do see, I think, although I don't know if I've seen like a pixel style basin, but I mean, there's been anaconda phase basins,
I don't think I've
patternless.
seen that. Yeah,
Yeah, not very many, not too many observed, but I've seen a few of them, and you can tell it's the
okay.
same mutation. It looks,
Yeah,
it looks the exact same, just a little different because it's a basin, and patternless as well. And I don't know, the calicos seemed like they was kind of similar as far as how they looked between the northerns and basins as well.
okay.
So yeah, and then I believe a piebald as well, northern.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Now that I remember, there was, yeah,
Wow.
old picture. Might have been Danny Bendez that had it.
Hmm.
Can't remember. I'd have to. I know I saved the picture somewhere. I'd have to look through. It was from an old book or maybe an old website.
Okay.
I'll dig around on the Wayback Machine, and go down those rabbit holes every now and again. You can see some cool shit.
Yeah.
If you get the patience for it. And yeah, piebalds, at least I think one example of that, and that looks pretty much like you would expect,
Yeah.
But again, nothing that's ever been reproduced.
Are there any kind of oddball animals? I know you mentioned the pixel one that Ron has that are in captivity right now, and who you would call capable hands that you're excited to see what might happen with them.
I can't remember if any of the calico or melanistic animals. I don't remember if those are still alive. The examples that I've seen.
Okay.
I feel like somebody had a calico northern in Europe, or maybe a pair of them, and I don't remember the status of them, if they're being bred or not. If that's like
Yeah.
what the status of that project was. So that would certainly be cool to see, what the progress of that is, if that goes that, if that ends up being successful.
Yeah.
And then the melanistic stuff has been really confusing because, like I said, seems like you see anything from like damn near jet black, to more of like an almost increasing melanogenic, IMG type of look, where just a progressively darker snake, but not totally jet black.
Okay.
And quite a few examples in between. I know Dee Dee, I can't remember. Sorry, I don't remember your last name. I think it's Toby is her last name. She's in Florida. She has a really cool looking, pretty highly melanistic northern right now,
Okay.
named
Cool.
Nebula. The beautiful animal, and that thing's killer.
Yeah.
And Keith Flax has a cool melanistic looking one as well. And I think
Okay.
Ian, I believe Ian has one as well.
Okay.
S&J Reptiles. So there's a few different melanistics floating around out there, but again, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be something anybody's been able to prove out yet,
Yeah.
in either basins or northerns. So that would be cool. I haven't. One thing that would be, I wish I would have saved the picture of this. I've yet to see any northerns that have like any kind of significant striping, other than there was one import that showed up on a dealer's site, probably like it was like right when I was first getting into them. There was an imported subadult that to me looked like it actually had some striping, like almost basin like striping.
Oh wow.
But it was interesting because it was clearly had the northern pattern look, but it had some vertebral striping going on there. But it had already been sold, or I would have immediately bought it.
Yeah.
So I don't know whatever happened to that animal. My guess is that we could probably know what happened to that animal. It's never popped
Yeah.
up again since. No talk of it. So, yeah, who knows? What all has popped up over the years that popped up and popped out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of the
Yeah.
problems that happen so often with them.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. So at this point, obviously, if you know Northern Emeralds, you've heard of the Miss Willie line. Are there other kind of established captive lineages out there that carry some weight?
Nothing like that.
Yeah.
Like I said, there was Ed's lines
Yeah.
of Northerns, but I think I told that story before that unfortunately the majority of those animals perished in a electrical mishap with a overheating situation. I think it's somebody who acquired a lot of his Northerns when he switched to just basins. There was at least one or two animals floating around here and there. I believe Ryan Wolson had one that Marshall had originally. So there may be others. I'm just not aware of them.
Yeah, I mean, at least in 2016, litter that Ryan had was merino blood on one side, because that's the one that Forrest ended up getting a baby from. It was Willie line to merino, and now and MJ has that snake now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So there's very, very little of that left, unfortunately, because I'm sure that would have been obviously with Ed's name on it and the quality of animals he's always produced. Those Northerns he was working with were amazing. I know that there's some non-Willie line blood from Rico is still out there. I believe Warren has at least one or two animals, because he had a litter a few years ago that was a Rico produced, but I don't believe it was a Miss Willie line animal, but it was a signal herp animal. So there's a few, signal herb lines, but none of them seem to carry that same,
Sure.
notoriety. And then in Europe, I'm still learning more every day about all the cool stuff they've got going on over there. They got amazing stuff going on over there, and a lot
Yeah.
of cool work that's been done by those guys that is inspirational. So I know like Magnus and a few other guys are working with willy line stuff, but also some completely unrelated high white bloodlines
Okay.
that they're also crossing with Willy to make some phenomenal animals.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Miss Willie's really kind of the sole. At least I'm just totally blanking right now. That's kind of the sole real
Sure.
northern bloodline that carries any kind of notoriety like that.
Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of a double-edged sword because, I feel like people who are new into emeralds, they see the Miss Willie line and now they're kind of overlooking almost everything else that exists out there because they want
Yeah,
Miss
you
Willie
get
line.
it's a little bit like what I was talking about earlier, and
Yeah.
I've talked about before, and that um, they're can sometimes put a little bit of blinders on people to other stuff out there, and I feel like there's still at this early stage with northerns in particular, and I do think this is going to change, and I'm hopefully I'm trying to do my part to actively change the situation and kind of bring awareness to the natural beauty and variety of the animals and
Yeah.
different phenotypes that I look at northerns as being in a state. It reminds me a lot of early 2000, late 90s, early 2000s with Central American boas,
Okay.
where at that point hardly anyone gave a shit about them,
Yeah.
and they just looked at it as like, well, this isn't a high contrast, extreme, phenotype true red tail, so who wants it? They're just
Yeah.
comparing two different things instead of appreciating that they're different and appreciating the beauty of those differences.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I'm pretty confident that more and more people are kind of waking up, wising up, whatever you want to call it, to the fact that like northerns are badass, and there's a lot of looks besides just the Ms. Willie,
Yeah.
and that there's a lot of different kind of variations, to be worked with there, and so I think it's really exciting, and I think that it even just gets better when you start potentially crossing Ms. Willie line stuff into all these other,
Yeah. For
all these
sure.
other phenotypes and bloodlines, and what happens if you start introducing Ms. Willie line stuff into some really sweet Anaconda phase. What does that do to the color and pattern?
Yeah.
We'll see. My hopes is that one of my kind of goals with the Anaconda phase stuff is to work towards kind of like it's almost like not a photo negative, but it's like the equivalent of extreme high white, but extreme high black, like a really, really high contrast, bold black pattern,
Yeah. That'd be
Anaconda
amazing.
phase. And I've got a few animals I think are showing that potential that, again, for them just being F1s, it's like I can see a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
So
That'd be amazing to have basically like you just described a high white, take a high white emerald and just swap that white for black. That would be a badass snake.
that's in my mind right now. That's one of the primary goals. So,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that'll be possible. I think it will. I mean, because like I said, I kind of feel like to me, what the Anaconda phase looks like is it's got the black layer of color.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have the white, or the white's been heavily reduced.
Yeah.
So if you get a really bold pattern, the bolder the pattern gets, theoretically anyways, you will hopefully have that kind of black up front and center. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of weird stuff there. I've been looking at some of these Anaconda phase that were born last year, and there's these kind of like white tipping going on in the scales in some of them in the pattern, and that changes a little bit as they gain a little bit of white over the first year. So some of them almost look like a normal in a way, in that they have a decent amount of white, but it's like this kind of frosted tip pattern, which should look pretty cool, I think.
Interesting.
I like too many different things with them, man. I should just pick a couple lanes and stick, but I can't.
I know
Every one of the unique ones, I'm just like, all right, I'm dedicating this project to this, and try to get it all to come out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know how that goes, and I mean, I think unfortunately, at some point, doing it all is probably not totally feasible for any one person.
No, there's and Ed has actually been good in advising on that a little bit. Like when I've asked him a couple things, because I see all sorts of little interesting markings and shit on some of them, and sometimes I'll ask Ed, I'm like, have you ever seen one like that? And not, half the time he's like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Don't worry about that. Don't waste your time on that or something. You know what I mean? Or he'll be like, well, I didn't prioritize chasing that because I was too focused on the high white. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Something like that. So it is tough because unless I'm gonna keep every single snake that I produce, and which I can't, you gotta
Yeah.
start slimming down a little bit, focusing a little bit more.
Yeah. No, I have been forced to do that a lot quicker than you, given that the snakes that I have are so much bigger. But
Oh yeah, man, for
but
sure.
yeah, I mean, particularly with the bar neck scrubs, I've just been like, all right, these are like the three main projects that I'm doing. It's like, kind of like a tan base color with almost as little pattern as possible, gold base color with high pattern, and then like melanistic.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't fall into those three categories, whether I like it or not, you know, it's not probably going to stay around. Which I think is cool because then, it gives somebody else the opportunity to take a project that I'm not working with and really run with it.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, though, at least what I have found, and this is probably going to be a bit different species to species, is that I'll still produce these snakes from my pairings, but then I just probably won't end up keeping them. So like I'll have them intermittently, raise them
Yeah.
up, produce them again. So you
And
still
just
get,
not really like push that in that direction too far.
yeah. Like I might not have that
Yeah.
snake when it's 10 feet long, but I'll have it for a year or two, and something like that. So you know, yeah, it sucks, especially when you're so like dedicated to this project, and the building stage is just like keep everything that you can. If you produce a litter, it's like boom, that's you've doubled your collection size or whatever, and then you do reach a point where it's like, all right, we've got there, we lay the groundwork, and now got to kind of change the mindset a bit.
Yeah, and that's what this past year has definitely been for me, is like,
Yeah,
I didn't expect to have anywhere near this many produced this fast, and or as many nice ones, and now it's like, all right, well, I can't do this every year. This is going to get asinine to try to keep this many holdbacks every year. So I've got to start
yeah,
getting more and really, really picky, and yeah, and to some degree deciding, like you said, kind of like, all right, I might not pursue that direction just because I can't do all of them. You know what I mean? I
yeah,
might have to go in a different way. So I'm just trying to, in addition to pursuing and line breeding and kind of pursuing, the more extreme phenotypes, I also just want to make sure that I've done a decent amount of work to help establish captive bloodlines in general, so that
yeah,
that's
for sure.
a lot more prominent out there. And because the more people that are working with those, I think a lot of the kind of, you know, understandable kind of perceptions of northerns, as far as some of the, of course, the sickly factor is something that's understandable, because there is a lot of that comes in with the wild caught stuff, and it was
Yeah,
even worse back in the day. But then even stuff like, the behavioral aspects of them, like I think a lot of that stuff will shift in a few more years, where people will
sure.
understand that's like, these aren't the nightmares that they've always been perceived to be.
Yeah,
And hopefully I'm doing, a half decent job of putting a dent in that, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with all
So,
the videos you post of like the snakes in your hands, especially the babies and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like that's the main way to start dispelling those types of stigmas, is just to literally show as clearly as you can how that's not your experience with it.
yeah, and I don't try to preach too much about that. I just basically
Yeah,
just, you know, they're not, most of them are not really that crazy, when they're,
yeah,
especially if they're captive bred. And I will probably do some more discussion on that in the future, and a little
okay,
more in detailed thoughts on the handling, and because I don't fully feel like I fit in 100% with anybody's opinion on that. A few people I see pretty eye to eye on with, Ed pretty closely, of course, and then
mm,
Daryl, a few other people that I feel pretty pretty in agreement with. But I think, like, I'd like to express myself a little more on the thoughts on that, and whether it's good for them, whether it's problematic. And it's a little tricky with that subject, obviously, because there's always been this kind of head-to-head fighting with that topic and them, and we'll see how it goes in the
Yeah,
future. But
sure.
I just always, I just do a little minimal handling with them and show that. The funny thing is really, one of the main reasons I handle them in the videos is just because it looks cool the way they move. I'm not necessarily even
Yeah,
trying to show like, oh, see, they're tame. It's just like, see how cool the snake looks. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I can't really show you how cool this looks unless I'm showing you the full body and the movement and everything. So,
Yeah. Well, I think especially with a chondro or an emerald, primarily you're seeing that snake in the top like half of its body because all the sides are pressed up against each other. So if you really want to get the full scope of that animal, I mean, a lot of green tree pythons, like some of the southern types, they have lots of blue down by their ventral scales, and if that animal is completely perched up, you're not going to
you
know
won't
that.
see it. Mm-hmm.
So like an Aru, I think there's probably a decent amount of green tree fans, maybe not keepers, but people who are getting into green trees who might not even know the full extent of the phenotype of an Aru green tree just because they see him just see him perched.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most incredible aspects of those snakes is the kind of that powder blue down by even sometimes they have full blue bellies. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
How do you know that the thing is perched? So
yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, I think I think there's so many cool things to the progress. Sorry, I'm looking at one of the babies I had over there. It's got its face like pushed up against the top, looking goofy.
nice.
But there's just so many cool aspects to the species that are, I think it's fun sharing it with people and kind of getting them to get excited about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And see them in a different light other than just hearing northern emerald and immediately thinking like, ugh, pain in the ass, mean, sick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, it's definitely it's a hill to climb, but it's also one that like people want there to be a solution. Like if you provide the answer to all of those concerns, like people are waiting for that to be like, oh, awesome! Like this thing isn't mean, isn't going to regurge and die. I want it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the regurge is going to be, that's the big thing. That's the biggest hurdle because
Yeah,
it's still happening so much, and there's still so much BS about it, and
sure.
confusion, and it's just like that's still going to take a while to get over that. And
Yeah, I mean, shoot, the conversation on that topic has evolved so much over the years, and I've heard people give their protocol on how to treat it, and then in hindsight, you're like, what the fuck was that guy talking about? Like that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like,
yeah,
and I'm not even referencing what you think I might be. This is even it's probably like 2018 or so when I heard this. I'm like,
yeah.
Like, what are you talking?
Oh yeah, no, I mean there's always goofy stuff with that.
Yeah.
I mean, and and I think I mean it's
probiotic
well
rich yogurt and stuff like that. It's like, huh?
Yeah, it's well intended. I mean, I know like
Sure.
people.
Well, but this guy in
get it,
particular was trying to flip wild caught emeralds and was pitching it of like, no, this is how you do it. And it's like, I wonder if there's some ulterior motive to your pitch here, which there certainly was. So
sure. And I mean, a lot of the stuff, it all in a lot of ways, it all just is essentially the same. Every time there's a brand new protocol that's solved all the problems, it's like if you break that new groundbreaking protocol down, it's like sounds a lot like all the old ones. It's all the same kind of concept. And I have my theories as to why that is the way that it is. You know what I mean? As far as why the same protocols initially seem to work and don't and stuff. So, but I think getting, I think we just have to get to the point to where it's like, rather than chasing a totally unfeasible solution, quote unquote, to a chronic illness that's caused by an infection. I think you look at to what the basin guys did, which is to weed it out. That's what happened with the basins is you unfortunately you weed it out through careful quarantine and selective breeding, and that's, to me, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think we should still. I'm pretty committed to beating the last podcast record. If you're tired, we can totally stop. But it's in my head of just like we just got to beat the number.
We would need to do
we don't have to. We don't have
full
to.
additional hour. Honestly, I would be totally down for it if I wasn't feeling kind of under the weather.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine.
But yeah, I mean, we definitely have more to talk about. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I haven't. I'm not feeling it a little bit right now.
That's fine, man. Yeah, we've rambled on. I mean, I think this has got to be approaching 10 hours, 9 hours.
Yeah, so I think between the first two, we just shot shy of 7. We probably eclipsed 10 hours in 3 podcasts.
I'm sure there's got to be. I mean, I'm sure probably just even announcing that there was going to be a part 3, so people are like, "Fuck this guy." Heard enough of this idiot. Tired of looking at his face. Tired of listening to his voice. Tired of hearing shit about humidity.
We've had good live listenership on all 3 episodes. So
yeah,
definitely.
No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it's been fun. The response has been good, and it's. I think that there's it's an exciting species. It's something that people are really into. So.
Okay, good question to throw out near the end. Favorite book or website to recommend about emeralds other than these podcasts?
Yeah, I mean, these podcasts are basically it. But I mean, you could see books. I'm trying to think of a real good source. I don't have like a singular source. There's the old Signal Herp source website rather through the Wayback Machine is cool for seeing northerns and basin stuff. Ed's site doesn't have a lot of info on it, but he's got some great pictures, of course. Tony Nicolai's old site, Glenn Bogue's site, which it's DutchArboreals.com. I can't remember. I think the last time I went there, it was I think it was under construction, so maybe he's redoing it or something.
Okay.
And there's probably some that I'm forgetting off of hand, but yeah, I've a lot of my research is really, my early research was done through podcasts and YouTube and a lot of just forum and Facebook group digging and looking at stuff that way. But there are some good books. I admit I'm kind of bad about reading them. So I've been more of like a consuming everything I possibly can through the internet type of person.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you haven't, I'm imagining most people that are here probably have seen Ed's episode on Unfiltered years ago. That's a classic. That's a must watch. Definitely. Must watch 25 times type of thing.
I would agree with that one. I would agree for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything. I guess if you want to wrap it up, we can. We didn't really go into feeding too much, but we don't really have to do that. I think we covered some of that last time. So
yeah, for sure. I think as far as I think we've definitely hit every aspect of all the life stages, the different care throughout breeding, development. So I mean, obviously, there's still plenty more to talk about, but we sure have talked about a lot. So we've logged those 10 hours of podcast.
The funniest thing is we still didn't do lighting, but we'll just do it.
I know. I was like, man, we should just finish on lighting, but I'm like, shoot, we might do an hour on lighting. So
yeah. Well, we bullshitted everybody on talking about lighting, so sorry about that.
Sorry for getting sick.
No lighting for y'all.
Only
to hear the juicy opinions.
Yeah. So we'll definitely need to talk about lighting on some other occasion. But so anyway, I guess with all that said, we're gonna wrap up now. Shout out your all your social media where people can find you and where they can try to ask you about availability and get told no.
No, so availability is actually for real opening up. Some people have already got some, and so it's opening up slowly and selectively. And but yeah, you can reach me. Instagram's still probably the best way in general. Cool. I mean, I miss a lot. I just don't get the damn notifications from Facebook Messenger half the time. So I'll check it, and it's like I feel bad since I didn't see that for like a week, 2 weeks, sometimes even a month. And so, or I'll accidentally open it and then forget to respond or something. So I'm pretty bad with Facebook. So if you really want to get through to me, Instagram's better. And
Okay.
right now that's still it's at snake.spirit is the Instagram account name. And that's, you know, your best bet to get in contact with me. And if you're really interested and really serious about the you know, about getting into them, then, you know, I'm down to talk with it. And like I said, I'm you know, I will have some limited availability going on starting basically right now. So
All
you
right.
know, over the coming weeks and months, I'll be releasing some more. And the only thing I ask is, like, some people they kind of come about it the wrong way. You know, I guess try to use some common sense with judgment. Don't,
Yeah.
if you're just sending me like what do you got,
Yeah.
or like you know, how much, and that's all you have to say about it, then I'm not exactly thrilled about
Yeah.
about getting back to you on
Show
that
that
kind
you're
of
at least
thing.
somewhat interested and have
Yeah, show me that
know
you're pretty
what
serious
you're.
about it, and
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing. So Steve says he sent me a message earlier today. Yeah, I don't know where you sent it, but I didn't see it yet anyway. So
Yeah. All right. Well,
all right, man.
cool, man. I once again, really appreciate your time tonight. We
Likewise, man.
setting podcast records for time and total hours logged. So,
Yeah.
and it seems like there's still more to talk about, which is what's so great about this whole reptile game. So, all
All
right.
right, man. Well, yeah, I appreciate it, and thanks to everybody who's come out and listened to the Emerald ramblings and the
Yep.
yeah.
All right, man.
entertained
Well,
it. Hopefully we've been entertaining.
yes, for sure. Well, have a good night, man.
You too. Take
All
care.
right. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry for having to cut it short, but yeah, I'm starting to feel it a little bit. So we'll definitely, I'll make up for it. I mean, shoot, it's 2.5 hours in. This is longer than most of the episodes go. But anyway, with all that said, if you're here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share, hit that notification bell so you never miss a show here on the channel. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from, a follow and a 5-star review would be wonderful. For me, I'm at scrubshepherd on Instagram, Stephen Kush on Facebook, Stephen Kush as well on YouTube. I have a new video coming out this Friday. As always, this one will be a video of some of my favorite colubrid projects I have raising up over here that I'm very excited to show you guys. Also at Kush Reptile on MORPH Market as well. I have a handful of scrub pythons up there available right now, some of the last ones from the 2024 season, and one older holdback animal that I've decided to let go as well. And I think that is about it. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. We'll catch you all back here next week for a new episode.
Shout out to USARK and all USARK members. If you don't know what USARK is, don't be ashamed. Just go ahead and click the third link in the description below. See what USARK is all about, okay? You never know when legislations are going to hit your backyard, so that's why it's very important to consider becoming a USARK member today. These numbers really do matter, and they look at it for consideration when it comes to battling legislation. So first and foremost, thank you, Phil Goss. Thank you to anybody out there who partners up and volunteers with USARK organization. Thank you for anyone out there who's a USARK member. And if you can't become a USARK member today, please talk about it on your platforms. Let your neighbors know, let all your pet stores know what USARK is here for, and it's here to fight for our animal rights. Thank you to every USARK member and USARK supporter out there. Choo!